Our story begins in a simpler time, when a young boy with spiky black hair proudly declares himself a wizard. He playfully challenges a friend, who retorts that she's a monster who eats wizards. Then, the boy prepares to cast his magics with a wooden stick. His spell, however, turns out to be a solid bonk on his friend's head. Upset, the girl complains that he's not playing right, while he insists that monsters are supposed to lose to wizards. At this, she quickly changes her mind, deciding she wants to be a wizard too, much to the amusement of a watching elder. The village elder, Grandpa Robus, approaches and comments on the children's morning energy. The boy eagerly asks him what it takes to become a real wizard. Robus explains the harsh reality. Wizards are the apex of humanity, nobles and knights who inherit their power through their bloodline. A passing villager scolds the elder for crushing their dreams, but Robus gently tells the boy it's not something you can achieve just by wanting it. Changing the subject, the villager asks Robus whether a recent rumor is true, and he asks he heard that a monster has appeared nearby. Rabus confirms it is true, while the villager elaborates that a man named Rop encountered it the previous night, which has sparked panic among the people. The monster is described as a terrifying, house-sized leopard cloaked in a pitch-black shadow. But Rabus reassures them that the village chief has already gone to the city to hire a wizard, and adds that he believes the monster will soon be subjugated. Just then, a mother warns a young girl to stay out of the forest until the threat is dealt with. After that, Rabus states, after all, the villagers know all too well that without a wizard, trying to kill a monster is a suicide mission. When asked if everyone knows, he confirms that the news has spread throughout the village. The villager then turns to him asking if the isolated shepherd on Hizaril Hill has been warned yet. High in the mountains above the village, the hills seem peaceful and serene. Here we meet that very shepherd, Turan, lazing in a field surrounded by his flock. With a blade of grass in his mouth, his expression is one of pure, unadulterated boredom. Stretched out among his sheep, he complains about how incredibly dull his life is. He's tired of the same scenery, and the same repetitive day, over and over again. He even worries that the sheer monotony of his isolated life will cause him to forget how to speak. His solitary grumbling is suddenly interrupted by a voice calling him a pathetic brat. It's Elder Rabus, who has climbed the hill just to scold him for slacking off before sunset. Turan coldly tells him to move, prompting Rabus to lament the boy's utter lack of manners. The elder then asks if he is still holding a grudge over a past incident. Turan bluntly clarifies, reminding Rabus of the time he tried to claim his sheep as village property right after his mother died. Sitting up, he states that he's not generous enough to share his mother's inheritance, and tells the infuriated elder to say what he came to say and then get lost. The young shepherd fixes Rabus with a challenging glare. Letting the insult slide, Rabus gets to the point. A monster has appeared, instantly grabbing Turan's attention. The elder confirms it's a leopard as big as a house and that he's just finished warning the other villagers. Turan's calm demeanor surprises Rabus, who points out that as a shepherd, he is the most likely target. However, Rabus warns him to be careful, adding that the village chief has gone to the city to request a wizard, and claims he came because he was worried, but Turan immediately calls him a liar. He scoffs, saying Rabus should just admit he was worried about the sheep, not him. With a dismissive smirk, he tells the elder to leave if he's done talking, and he lands a final verbal blow, complaining that the old man's breath is so bad it's going to make his nose rot. As the fuming Rabus stomps away, Turan calmly returns to tending his flock. His thoughts, however, turn to the news of the monster, and he muses on the nature of monsters and wizards, seeing them as magical counterparts in the world of beasts and humans. The cynical shepherd considers that because of the monster, he might finally get to see a wizard in person. However, he assumes any wizard a backwater village chief could afford won't be anything special. Despite his skepticism, he is intrigued and genuinely curious to witness a wizard's true strength. Suddenly, his sharp senses pick up an alarming scent on the wind. He stands alert, recognizing the unmistakable, coppery smell of blood. Following the scent, he makes his way into the darkening woods. Then he comes to a sudden halt, his eyes falling upon a grim discovery. In a bloody clearing lies the mangled corpse of the village elder, Rabus. Turan dryly notes the irony. Rabus had warned him to be careful, only to charge into the danger himself. Examining the body, he quickly deduces the wounds weren't made by any ordinary animal. He knows with certainty that this is the work of the monster. His head whips around as he senses he is no longer alone. From the shadows, a massive, stone-like clawed paw emerges. The gargantuan shadow leopard monster reveals its terrifying form. Wreathed in dark energy with glowing yellow eyes, towers over the lone shepherd. His mind flashes back to his childhood when he asks how strong monsters really are. At this, his father had told him they are insanely strong, beyond what even adults could handle. He had warned that if an ordinary person tried to fight one, there wouldn't even be bones left to collect. The young Turan, worried for his village, had pressed for a solution. He was reassured that the village chief would bring a wizard who would easily subjugate the monster. In his innocence, the boy had asked if the wizard was guaranteed to win and punish the monster. His father figure smiled, explaining that wizards are great beings born with the power of magic, and had confidently told the boy that a wizard could kill a monster with a single word. Back in the present, Turan faces the beast, recalling that popular piece of folklore. His eyes narrow, filled with disbelief at such a simplistic notion. Testing the theory, he speaks the single word, die, but the monster is completely unfazed. The shadow leopard merely lets out a low growl, ignoring the command entirely. Undeterred, Turan stands his ground as a palpable energy begins to emanate from him. However, he notes with mild disappointment that the one-word kills method isn't working. With a burst of speed, the monster lunges forward to attack. This time, Turan raises his voice and commands it to stop. An invisible force slams into the monster, momentarily halting its charge. He's surprised. While he expected it wouldn't kill the beast, he's shocked his power couldn't even fully stop its momentum. The monster's immense strength allows it to shatter his telekinetic barrier and resume its attack. Snarling, the shadow leopard closes the final few feet between them. Turan effortlessly leaps backward, dodging the monster's powerful swipe. Realizing his initial approach was insufficient, he decides to get serious. He calmly reaches into his pouch and pulls out a simple, jagged stone. Loading his sling, he concludes that if words won't work, a shepherd should do what a shepherd does best. The monster roars and charges at him once more. Turan channels his immense magical energy into the stone, commanding it to harden. As he unleashes his power, the ordinary rock begins to glow with a formidable aura. His eyes flare with golden light as he imbues the stone with a second command, become faster. He then begins to whirl the sling, generating incredible rotational velocity. Planting his feet, he puts his entire body into the final swing. With one last command to pierce through, he unleashes his weapon. The magically enhanced stone shoots forward like a cannonball, trailing blue light. Now a blur of pure kinetic energy. The projectile homes in on its target. It effortlessly dodges the monster's flailing claws and pierces the monster's body. After that, it smashes against the hillside surface. Turan watches calmly as his pinpoint attack finds its mark. A confident smirk plays on his lips as he confirms his target. A large stone tumbles down from the slope. Declaring he was aiming for the head, the stone crushes the monster's skull. The sheer force of the impact completely shatters the beast's armored cranium. He watches as the dust and debris from his attack begin to settle. As the colossal shadow leopard collapses, killed instantly by the single perfectly placed shot, he remarks that this is his first time using his power on a monster. Looking at the massive carcass, he casually wonders if he should just dump it in a nearby valley. Wiping blood from his face, he clicks his tongue in annoyance, muttering that the villagers have certainly put him to work. Still spattered with blood from his fight, Turan cynically reflects on the trouble he went through for the ungrateful townsfolk. In a moment of quiet introspection, he affirms his hidden identity. He is a wizard. His mind drifts back 8 years, to the time he first realized he possessed these special abilities. The flashback reveals a 10-year-old Turan joyfully practicing his newfound telekinesis by levitating tools and wobs in his home, and proudly turns to his mother, excitedly exclaiming that he can make the logs fly. But as his mother enters the room, she freezes, her cane clattering to the floor as she witnesses her son's display of magic. He remembers the day clearly, recalling how he'd innocently demonstrated his ability to create fire and wind for her. Instead of praise, however, his mother screamed at him to stop, the first and only time she ever got truly angry with him. As the magical glow fades, she calmly takes control of the floating objects, her tone serious as she calls his name. She then kneels before him, gently explaining that they need to have a serious chat. She starts with a loaded question, asking if he wants to stay with her for a long time, to which the young boy earnestly agrees. With his agreement secured, she asks him to make a solemn promise to stop using his powers from that day forward. Then, with a look of sheer desperation, she specifies her command: he must never, ever use his power in front of other people. When the boy asks why, she brings up a story she once told him about nobles and knights. He recalls the lesson, remembering that while both are called wizards, there is an inherent difference between them. His mother's story explained that nobles are the descendants of the divine Freyans who came to save the old humans. The story continued, defining knights as the descendants of nobles whose divine bloodline has been mixed with that of humans. And he confirms that he remembers the distinction she taught him. She then explains that this class system is precisely why he can never reveal his abilities to anyone, and reveals a crucial secret: he inherited his powers from his father, a knight, and warns him of the many evil nobles who treat knights as slaves. After that, she makes her most important point: pleading with him to remember that absolutely nobody can know he is a wizard. With tears in her eyes, she desperately seeks his promise to keep this dangerous secret. Back in the present, Turan stands alone in his home, reflecting that for 8 long years, he has kept that promise to his mother. As he pulls the curtain, he remains resolute in his decision. The promise will not be broken. Peeking out the window, he reaffirms his commitment to a quiet life, having no desire to reveal himself or leave the mountain. So he turns away from the window, content to remain isolated from the world below. But suddenly, his peace is shattered by a furious pounding as a villager screams his name, demanding he come out. He steps outside to face an angry mob, led by the same burly man who has troubled him before. Completely unfazed, he lets out a bored yawn before addressing the angry crowd. Just then, he casually walks toward them, confirming their ridiculous accusation that he killed Rebus. The lead villager immediately grabs his collar, furiously accusing him of being shameless, and shouts that he hurt the old man and then fed him to the monsters. Turan coolly notes that he understands why they want to frame him, leaving the armed villagers confused. He accurately deduces their motive. The village elder died while they were all too cowardly to act, so now they need a scapegoat. With a smirk, he tells them that shifting the blame to him is the easiest way to absolve themselves of their cowardice. Enraged at being exposed, the lead villager screams Turan's name and swings a powerful punch. However, our guy easily dodges it. His mind is clear. He thinks to himself how convenient magic can be in a situation like this. With a subtle burst of magic, he launches himself into a devastating headbutt, proving his point, and muses that his magic works by simply wishing for an outcome, which consumes mana, just as the rest of the villagers charge him. Without any grand gestures, he simply thinks the words, "fall over," letting his magic do the work. Immediately, a charging villager trips and eats dirt, demonstrating his ability to use his powers subtly. He uses just enough magic to trip up his attackers, making sure his influence isn't obvious. Then he moves with brutal efficiency, striking his opponents with just enough force to incapacitate them without causing fatal injury. With superior skill and a bit of magical help, he decides to utterly dominate the foolish villagers. The mob is completely outmatched as he effortlessly dodges their clumsy swings and lands decisive counterblows. In a flurry of motion, their clubs are knocked from their hands and sent spinning into the air. As the last attacker hits the ground, he reflects that this is how he has protected his secret for the past 8 years. Standing amidst the defeated villagers, he internally confirms that he has successfully hidden the fact that he is a wizard. Looking down on the men with disdain, he tells them they should have saved their energy for the old man's funeral. Just then, a group of village women arrives. He curtly asks if they're also looking for a fight, but they quickly deny it. The women timidly explain they just came to see him, a statement he greets with cold silence. Turning his back, he dismissively tells them to drag the unconscious men away and heads back inside. Back in his house, he anticipates that the villagers will now use this incident as an excuse to rip him off in trades. But he calmly decides on his usual solution. He'll just beat them up until he gets a fair price. And muses that the beating he just delivered should keep them away for a while, but he's interrupted by another knock at the door. Annoyed by the new disturbance, he wonders if they're insane enough to come back for another round. The steady, insistent knocking continues. He throws the door open, ready to unleash his anger, but stops short at the sight of a stranger. Standing before him is not a villager, but an imposing, well-dressed traveler. When our guy asks who he is, the mysterious man quickly apologizes, realizing he's arrived at an inopportune moment. Turan is taken aback, silently questioning if this newcomer is truly just a simple traveler. Attempting to be polite, he apologizes for his hostile greeting, explaining that he just dealt with some unruly guests. He then internally frets over his awkward attempt at courtesy, realizing he has no practice being nice to people. His suspicion rises as he clocks the sword at the man's hip, an unusual sight in this sleepy rural town. Putting on a friendly demeanor, he starts to offer the traveler directions to a local inn. But changing his mind mid-sentence, he simply decides to invite the mysterious man inside. While the traveler heartily enjoys the meal, Turan humbly states that he isn't well off, but the man graciously calls it a feast. The traveler expresses his surprise that Turan has never met an outsider, a fact our protagonist confirms, and explains that he's lived his whole life as a shepherd on the hill, and it's rare for anyone to visit. After taking a drink, the traveler looks at him and remarks that it's interesting. Turan looks up from his mug, puzzled by the cryptic comment. However, the man elaborates, noting that he is remarkably well-mannered for a reclusive shepherd and must have had good parents. Turan confirms he learned his manners from his mother, but adds that she died from an illness a few years prior. Offering his condolences, the traveler says that raising such a fine son ensures she resides in the heavens. Turan stands, simply stating that he lives by his mother's teachings before asking his guest's purpose in town. The traveler reveals he came to the countryside because he was asked to perform a favor, and explains that he was asked to hunt and take care of a monster puma. Then, dropping all pretense, the traveler makes a startling confession: he is a wizard. But Turan remains outwardly calm, deducing that this must be the wizard the village elder hired. The wizard's demeanor shifts, and he asks if he can pose a question of his own. His first point is a sharp one. He can sense a monster's presence, but there is no monster to be found. His questioning intensifies as he notes how strangely calm the young shepherd is, despite knowing a monster killed the village elder. He then leans in, pressing him on why he isn't scared, considering he would be the monster's most likely next target. The wizard continues his interrogation, pointing out that he seems far too brave for a simple shepherd. With all cordiality gone, he fixes him with an intense stare and demands to know who he is. The question echoes in the tense silence, hitting the core of Torin's hidden identity. His mind flashes back to his mother's warning, to the time he asked why no one could know he was a wizard. Even he recalls questioning her about the bad nobles she had mentioned. She had used a grim analogy, comparing nobles to shepherds and knights to the dogs they keep, and explained that while a noble might treat a knight like family, they could also sell or sacrifice them whenever necessary. Therefore, she had pleaded with him, saying she didn't want that kind of disposable life for him, before asking if he still wanted to stay with her. The memory of her ultimate lesson rings in his ears. Other wizards are the greatest threat, as they would turn him into a disposable shepherd dog. As he faces the wizard's pointed question, Turan recalls his mother's advice on how to avoid being found out, and her final, chilling warning comes to the forefront of his mind: to protect his secret, he might have to kill. Now, facing the mysterious wizard, he steels himself, prepared to kill if necessary. So he silently accepts that this tense standoff could very well end in bloodshed. Just then, the wizard demands to know why he won't answer. But just as the tension peaks, the wizard suddenly breaks into a grin, sheepishly admitting his intense demeanor was just an awkward joke. Turin is left completely baffled, trying to process that the life-or-death situation was apparently a prank. He apologizes for his lack of humor, but the wizard insists the fault was his for flustering the young man. After that, the wizard confesses that the young shepherd's dead serious reaction was so amusing he couldn't help but take the teasing too far, while Turan finally lightens up, admitting it's his first time hearing a wizard joke. Realizing they have yet to properly introduce themselves, the wizard extends a hand in friendship, and formally introduces himself not as a hired hand, but as Kior, a simple wanderer. Turin accepts the handshake, apologizing for not having introduced himself first. Maintaining his facade, our protagonist simply introduces himself as Turan, a shepherd. As they share a meal, they exchange ages. Turan reveals he's 18, while Kior admits he's 75. When the young man expresses surprise at his youthful appearance, Kior explains that wizards age much more slowly than ordinary people. Curious, Turan asks how he became a wanderer, and Kior explains that he left after serving the Arabian family for 60 years. And cheerfully explains his desire to roam freely in his later years, a notion the young shepherd finds quite romantic. For the first time in a long while, Turan finds himself genuinely smiling, enjoying the light-hearted conversation. And Kior, too, shares a warm smile, clearly enjoying the unexpected company. The two talk through the entire night, as Turan reflects on how surprisingly enjoyable it is to connect with a good person. As the sun begins to rise, Kior realizes with a start that the entire night has passed them by. At this, our guy says he didn't even notice the sun was coming up. Just then, Kior places a silver coin on the table, stating, "This is Arabian silver. It's not the purest among silver coins, so it should more than cover the cost of the meal." Turan gratefully accepts and wishes him well on his hunt, but Kior tells him not to talk, as if they'll never see each other again. With a friendly smirk, he jokes that he might just stop by to mooch off him again in the future. Later that day, Turan is back to his usual routine, tending his sheep in the peaceful pasture. With a single quiet command, "Gather," he subtly uses his magic. And his entire flock immediately responds, running obediently toward their shepherd. He reflects that this was not only the first time he'd met another wizard, but also the first time he'd ever felt so comfortable in a conversation. He then fondly recalls Kior's natural ease and humor, finding him to be more of a respectable adult than anyone he'd ever met. Imagining the wizard's return, Turan concludes that he was truly a good person. His preconception of knights as mere emotionless hunting dogs for nobles is completely shattered by their encounter. Then, a new problem dawns on him as he furrows his brow in thought. He now has to figure out how to tell Kior that there are no monsters left to hunt on his Aril Hill, because he already killed it. Meanwhile, Kior arrives at the monster's last known location and immediately senses that something is amiss. He discovers signs of a fierce battle, yet cannot feel the presence of any monster nearby. Looking up at a giant tree, he finds the monster's carcass, wondering who could have possibly hunted it already, and considers if the village chief hired another wizard for the job. Ultimately, he decides it doesn't matter who killed it, feeling relieved that the village is now safe. But suddenly, an immense and malevolent energy flares up, catching the veteran wizard completely off guard. From the dead monster's corpse, a grotesque and horrifying entity erupts. Korn immediately identifies the creature as a monster's wraith, a powerful undead being born from its lingering mana. At this, he's shocked, wondering what kind of amateur wizard would make the foolish mistake of leaving a monster's mana unpurified. Without warning, the wraith lunges, swiping down with its massive spectral claws. Kior barely manages to dodge the devastating attack, and he knows that any wizard who hunts monsters understands the most basic rule: absorb or disperse the mana to prevent a wraith from forming. Just then, he leaps back to create distance, his mind racing to make sense of the situation. The evidence points to a wizard having killed the monster, but he can't fathom why they would intentionally leave a wraith behind. However, he reasons that a novice who didn't know this rule couldn't possibly have killed such a powerful monster to begin with. The only remaining possibility is that the mysterious wizard left the wraith here with some other, more sinister intention. Pushing those questions aside, he focuses on the immediate threat, conjuring a magic sword to destroy the wraith. He fires a blast of energy, but to his shock, it fizzles out before it even reaches its target. Kior realizes with dawning horror that his magic was nullified, which means the wraith's mana is vastly superior to his own. Then the wraith suddenly vanishes from sight, putting the outmatched wizard on high alert. He frantically scans his surroundings, realizing the creature is using its own magic to outmaneuver him. Appearing from the shadows, the wraith readies itself for the attack. Kior throws up a desperate block, but the sheer force of the blow completely overwhelms him. Coughing up blood, he grits his teeth, acknowledging that this foe is beyond a knight's power and would require a noble to defeat. He then laments the cruel fate of encountering such a powerful entity in this remote, backwater village. Facing the towering monstrosity, he grimly accepts that his journey ends here. Yet despite the impossible odds, he clenches his jaw, refusing to die without a fight and vowing to take the monster with him. So he begins to concentrate every last bit of his mana into his hand, planning a final, suicidal strike. As the wraith lunges down to finish him off, he prepares to meet its attack head-on. With a defiant roar, he pours all his remaining life force into one explosive, last-ditch attack, and leaps toward the wraith, ready to trade his own life for a chance to destroy it. But in that critical moment, a brilliant flash of blue light streaks through the forest. A mana-infused stone slams into the wraith, deflecting its killing blow just inches from Kior's face. The wizard is shocked, his life miraculously saved at the very last second. Looking up in utter disbelief, he hears a familiar voice ask if he's all right. It's Turan, who casually remarks that a shepherd's joke can be quite startling too, throwing Kior's own words back at him. Sling in hand, the young shepherd walks calmly toward the stunned and wounded wizard. The truth finally dawns on Kior. The young man he spent all night with was a wizard in disguise. Still processing the revelation, he demands to know why Turan hid his identity from him. He then changes his question, asking why the young wizard would risk exposing himself to save him when he could have simply walked away. With a knowing smile, Turan begins to explain. His mind flashes back to their conversation the night before, recalling the wolf Kior had brought as a gift. He remembers asking Kior why he would go to such lengths for the villagers, and had pointed out that a wizard of Kior's caliber could surely earn far more money with much less effort elsewhere. Kior's simple answer was that he found the villagers pitiful. He had expressed a sense of duty, feeling sorry for those living in constant fear on the frontier without any real protection, and had voiced his own philosophy that wizards who inherited the power of a god should take pride in protecting the powerless. He then adds, wistfully, that everyone has their own thoughts and their own way of life. Back in the present, Turan finishes his explanation by quoting Kior's own words back to him, reaffirming their shared belief. Just then, the recovering wraith lets out a roar and slams its claws onto the ground, snapping Kior back to the immense danger they are in. He frantically warns Turan that the wraith is far too powerful for them to handle, and urgently tells him to run, explaining that only a noble-rank wizard could fight it, and that he must warn the village to evacuate. Stepping in front of Turan, he says he will hold it here. But as he prepares for his final stand, Turan's calm voice cuts through the tension, simply telling him, "It's okay." Korn looks back, completely confused by the young man's lack of concern. Turan casually explains that if his first attack landed correctly, the fight is already over, while gesturing to the glowing stone on the ground. At this, Kior is speechless, unable to comprehend how a young knight hiding in the mountains could possibly hunt a wraith that even nobles struggle against. In that moment, the veteran knight has a world-shattering epiphany. He realizes what he's witnessing isn't the reckless bravado of a runaway noble, but something far, far more significant. As Turin unleashes a colossal swirling torrent of blue mana, Kiorn finally understands the true nature of the boy before him, and sees this as the very beginning of a legend, the birth of a wizard who will one day turn the world upside down. All the while Turin smirks, admitting he was curious about his own limits too. As the monster's wraith looms, Turin prepares to fight it alone, levitating rocks with his raw power. He smirks confidently, admitting to Kiorn that he's also curious to see the true extent of his own limits. However, Kiorn ignites his hands with fire magic, refusing to let him face the tough opponent on his own. But before Kiorn can even finish his plea to join forces, the monster wraith unleashes a terrifying attack. Turin, however, uses his blue flames to counter it. Kiorn admits to himself that he couldn't even react, realizing he would only be a hindrance in this fight. Understanding his current weakness, he decides against interfering directly with the battle. Instead, he resolves that his new purpose is to help the young man's incredible talent fully bloom. Meanwhile, despite his flashy blue attacks, Turin grows frustrated as they fail to connect. His magically enhanced physical attack smashes into the ground, proving completely ineffective against the ethereal wraith. Seeing this, Kiorn desperately yells out, explaining that physical attacks are useless against a wraith. Cornered by the charging monster, the young shepherd shouts back, demanding to know how he's supposed to kill it. Kiorn roars the answer: he must use fire to destroy the spectral beast. And, as Kiorn also suggests lightning, a flicker of understanding dawns in Turin's eyes. He attempts to cast a fire spell for the first time, but only manages to produce a weak flame that fizzles out against the wraith. When he states the obvious, Kiorn retorts that he's missing the entire point of how magic works, and is horrified to realize that Turin, despite his immense power, doesn't even know the basics of magic, like establishing causality. A shocking realization begins to dawn on him as he connects the dots of the young man's ignorance. He understands now. Turin killed the original monster but left its mana unpurified, inadvertently creating this wraith himself. Then, the most astonishing conclusion hits him. Turin has somehow achieved this level of power without ever having absorbed mana in his life. Dumbfounded by this untapped potential, he shouts new, more direct instructions: don't light a fire, make it and then shoot it. Taking the advice to heart, Turin sprints towards the monster, preparing to try again. Kiorn worries internally, knowing that while creating fire is simple, controlling it requires extensive training. But to his utter amazement, Turin instantly masters the spell, conjuring a massive, perfectly controlled ball of fire. With a powerful strike, he slams the condensed fireball directly into the monster. The flames erupt, engulfing its spiritual core. The attack culminates in a massive fiery explosion, completely overwhelming the wraith. Just then, Kiorn shouts encouragement, telling him to keep his mind focused and continuously pour mana into the flames, and urges him to burn away every last trace of it to ensure its permanent destruction. Turin maintains his focus, his eyes glowing with the intensity of the inferno he commands. The raging fire swirls into a vortex, completely annihilating the monster. As the smoke clears, a relieved Kiorn looks to the sky and declares their victory. However, he marvels at the fact that they defeated a wraith so strong it should have required at least a noble-class wizard to fight, and he is still reeling from the fact that this untrained shepherd managed to take it down. Standing over the smoldering remains, Turin asks if it's finally over, while Kiorn can only stare in disbelief. To prevent another wraith from forming, Kiorn instructs him to absorb the leftover mana, but the young man has no idea how. So he instructs him: imagine himself draining something into him. Following the instruction, Turin closes his eyes and concentrates. Immediately, a torrent of green mana begins to rise from the dissipating corpse. The immense energy flows directly into his outstretched hand, coalescing into a sphere of pure mana. It surges through his body, outlining his silhouette in a crackling green aura. His eyes fly open, now glowing with the overwhelming power he has just absorbed. Watching on, Kiorn comments that the process should feel pleasurable, all while struggling to believe what he's witnessing. And Turin confirms his suspicion. This was, without a doubt, his first time ever absorbing mana. Kiorn's mind races, reciting the basics of wizardry. Mana grows slowly with age, and the best way to get stronger is to absorb it from defeated foes. And concludes that since Turin could perform such powerful magic before absorbing mana, his innate potential must be in a completely different league. And so, he reaches a stunning conclusion. The young man before him must be of noble blood. His entire demeanor shifting, he formally calls out to Turin. With newfound respect, he bows his head, apologizing for his past rudeness and asking which noble house he belongs to. A slightly amused Turin casually tells the very formal man to wipe the blood off his arm first. Startled, Kiorn looks down to see his arm is still bleeding from their earlier fight. Later, back at Turan's home, Kiorn nurses his bandaged arm, still processing the day's events. As Turan brings him medical supplies, Kiorn apologizes profusely for his prior disrespect. Turan, however, dismisses the formality, insisting he's not someone esteemed, but just a simple shepherd who doesn't even know his own father. So he gives the man a stern look, telling him to stop, and Kiorn awkwardly agrees. Finally, Kiorn asks the question that's been on his mind. Why would a wizard as powerful as him choose to live as a shepherd? Turan reveals it was his mother's final request before she died, and explains her warning that the nobles below the mountain would only use a wizard like him and then throw him away. Kiorn surprises him by agreeing with his mother, calling her a wise woman. Turan admits he expected him to call it overprotective parenting, but Kiorn assures him she wasn't wrong. He begins to tell a story from 20 years ago, explaining that great power inevitably leads to conflict, like the war between great noble houses, and reveals he served House Arabian in their great war against the ruthless House Zahar. He recalls the immense bloodshed of the war, a time when countless people died. He then grimly states that nearly a third of his house's 3,000 knights were wiped out in the conflict. Tragically, he reveals that everyone he cared about was among that fallen third. He remembers his lost comrades, his friend Denver, who dreamed of a peaceful life, and his teacher Hartman. Then his memories turn to his greatest loss, his beloved wife and son, who were massacred by House Zahar, leaving him the sole survivor. Therefore, he tells Turan that this is why his mother was right. A knight's life can be thrown away even more meaninglessly than a commoner's. However, Kiorn points out that his mother was wrong about one crucial thing: Turan's aptitude for magic. He humbly admits that even with his considerable skill, he stood no chance against the Wraith that the young shepherd defeated with ease, and states with certainty that Turan's potential is not merely that of a knight. At the very minimum, he is noble level. In fact, he confidently assesses his power as being at least upper tier among the nobles. When Turan questions his own lineage, Kiorn explains that while it's rare, noble-class children are sometimes born to knights. Convinced of his potential, he urges him to leave this isolated life and venture out into the world. He argues that humanity needs more powerful nobles and knights, as they are not yet the true masters of the world. After that, he warns that other, older races, once pushed out by the gods, are still lurking, waiting for a chance to reclaim their world. Yet, amidst this existential threat, the human nobles foolishly continue to wage war amongst themselves. Because of this turmoil, he believes the world desperately needs strong and kind-hearted nobles like him. Standing in the doorway, he perceptively tells Turan that he knows he isn't truly satisfied with his life as a shepherd. His words strike a chord, and Turan silently contemplates the truth in them. He voices his uncertainty, asking what he could possibly gain by leaving his home. Kiorn lists the possibilities: wealth, fame, authority, family, or friendship, all things he can't find in isolation. He then paints a picture of a new life, suggesting he could wander and destroy monsters that threaten people, and offers other paths: becoming an explorer of the unknown, or even being adopted into a powerful house. Having listened to Kiorn's persuasive arguments, Turan begins to see his point, and admits that a life of adventure does sound far more interesting than simply herding sheep. A smile touches his lips as he confesses that, for the first time, he's genuinely curious about the outside world. Kiorn is pleased by this change of heart and promises to support him in any path he chooses. Changing the subject, he then asks about Turan's bloodline ability, a term the young shepherd doesn't recognize. Kiorn smiles, apologizing for forgetting how little the young man has been taught about the ways of magic. He then explains that a bloodline ability is an inherited trait from their Freyan ancestors, and it is what truly separates nobles from knights, and asks him to think about any spells that feel unusually easy, or any outstanding non-magical talents he might possess. Turan mentions his physical strength, but Kiorn dismisses it as a natural side effect of possessing mana. Turan then lists his only other talents: a good sense of smell and being skilled at throwing stones. Kiorn muses that skill with thrown weapons is a common trait, even one of his own House Arabian, and asks for more details. He eagerly presses Turan to continue, sensing he's close to an answer. Turan agrees, unaware of the implications of what he's about to say, but after he explains further, Kiorn falls into a stunned, grim silence, unnerving him. Kiorn's body tenses as a terrible realization dawns, prompting a worried Turan to ask what's wrong. Looking away, he somberly states that he thinks he knows which house his abilities are closest to. As Turan innocently asks which one, the grim look on Kiorn's face deepens. He reveals that Turan's lineage connects him to a great and powerful house. With a flashback to his own slaughtered family, he names the house known for their tracking abilities, House Zahar. And he clarifies that House Zahar is the very same house that waged war against his own house. Turin is left utterly speechless, realizing his potential mentor is the sole survivor of a massacre perpetrated by his own ancestors. The name of the great and infamous house echoes in his mind, leaving him in a state of shock. He grapples with the fact that he's from the same bloodline as the enemies who slaughtered Kiorn's family and comrades. Conflicted, he wonders if he should apologize for the actions of relatives he has never even met. However, Kiorn interrupts his troubled thoughts, gently calling his name, and tells the boy, "Don't make such a worried expression." Then, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder, he tries to comfort the young mage, reminding him that he didn't personally participate in the war and therefore bears no responsibility. Dismissing it as a complicated adult situation, Kiorn wisely states that washing blood with blood will never end the cycle of fighting. Cautiously, Turin asks if Kiorn has any regrets about his advice. Specifically, he wonders if he now regrets telling him to go down the hill, knowing his Zahar heritage. Kiorn acknowledges that with the boy's outstanding abilities, pursuing power will inevitably lead him to the Zahar family. "But I trust your character," he declares, surprising Turin with his unwavering faith. The knight elaborates on his goodness, musing that someone like him could rise within the Zahar family and change it from the inside. The idea that he could potentially prevent another terrible war gives the young mage pause. He then tells him not to think too seriously about it, as it's not a decision he has to make right away. But Turin interrupts, announcing that after their talk, his thoughts are now clear. With newfound resolve, he declares, "I want to try going down the mountain." Kiorn smiles, approving of his decision, but adds, "But not right away." Out of respect, Turin decides he will head down only after Kiorn's injuries have fully healed. Touched by his kindness, Kiorn remarks that he is truly a good person. While they wait, Korn begins Turin's formal magic education, explaining that mana is the absolute key to omnipotence. Turin listens intently as Kiorn clarifies that while powerful, one needs mana that specifically matches the desired magic. When Turin asks about the standard, Kiorn prepares to explain the core principles of magic. He holds up 3 fingers, listing the factors that determine magic's difficulty: bloodline, affinity, and causality, and starts with bloodline, an innate power determined at birth that primarily applies to nobles. To illustrate, he asks if Turin could heal his bandaged wounds with magic, to which the boy confirms he cannot. He then contrasts this with the Revista bloodline from the south, for whom healing is an innate ability they can use without training. Next, the young mage asks about affinity, which Kiorn explains is another word for familiarity. Our guide correctly intuits that this is why he could easily create a fireball, as it mimics the familiar action of throwing a rock. Korn confirms this, noting that if Turin had simply tried to make flames appear, the spell wouldn't have had the same speed or power. Finally, he introduces the most important and complex concept: causality, an element that even he doesn't fully understand. He then poses a hypothetical: if Turin tried to kill him directly with mana, it would likely result in nothing more than a harmless flash of light. This phenomenon, he demonstrates by making a mug crackle with energy, occurs because of a lack of causality. When there's no appropriate cause for a desired outcome, like making water boil instantly, the magic becomes excessively difficult to perform. Turin nods, beginning to grasp the complex principle of cause and effect in magic, and correctly deduces that to kill someone, he'd need to provide a cause of death, like creating and shooting flames, rather than just wishing them dead. This is because creating and shooting fire is a more natural causal chain than simply willing someone to ignite. Impressed by his quick grasp of the concept, Kiorn exclaims that he could have been a scholar. Turin then questions why this rule applies to magical beasts but not ordinary animals, and Kiorn explains it's due to their inherent mana. As the two continue their lesson deep into the day, one of Turin's sheep listens in from outside the window. Musing that magic isn't easy, Turin listens as Kiorn agrees, stating that a truly excellent mage understands the principles behind mana, not just how to use it. This prompts him to ask about the Zahar bloodline special magic, which Kiorn reveals is stealth and tracking. "Try it once," Kiorn encourages, and a curious Turin readily agrees. He closes his eyes, focusing his intent. "I don't want to be seen. I wish neither sound nor smell could be detected." Kiorn watches with anticipation, waiting to see if the novice mage can pull off such an advanced technique. As Turin focuses, his presence begins to fade, his form wavering and distorting the light around him until he vanishes. "You succeeded," Kiorn says in awe, confirming to the empty space. "I can't see you." Indeed, the boy has vanished completely, leaving the room appearing entirely empty. He then reappears, the powerful stealth magic dissolving around him like shattered glass. Turin clenches his fist, feeling the frightening power he now wields, as Kiorn recalls how feared this ability was during the war. While admitting it's an unfairly powerful ability, Kiorn wisely warns him to remember that it is not invincible. As Kiorn prepares to teach him more, Turin questions if he's teaching too much to a mage from an enemy family. Kiorn simply reminds him that he saved his life and nursed him back to health. Then, placing a hand over his heart, he reaffirms his earlier declaration, "I trust your character." With his training complete, Turan goes to the village and shocks the chief with the news that he's selling his sheep and leaving. The chief panics, sputtering about who will now take on the shepherding duties for the village. Now, dressed for travel, he stands before the irate villagers as the chief demands to know why he wasn't consulted. Turan coolly retorts that finding a new shepherd is their problem, and what he does with his own belongings is none of their concern. He then issues an ultimatum, buy the sheep at a fair price or he'll simply release them all into the wild. Knowing his sheep are too wild to be easily recaptured, the other villagers anxiously look to the chief for a decision. The chief, recalling that the young man is true to his word, knows that aggravating him further will accomplish nothing. So, he reluctantly agrees to Turin's terms, handing over a hefty bag of money for the flock. With his last tie to the village severed, he leaves alongside Kiorn, now free to do as he wishes. As they walk, Turin thoughtfully offers to go back and collect the compensation money the villagers still owe Kiorn. But Kiorn declines, stating he never intended to collect it, especially since Turan was the one who actually dealt with the magical beast. With all business concluded, Turan agrees, and they prepare to go their separate ways. Soon, they arrive at a fork in the road, where Kiorn announces that this is where they must part, and apologizes for refusing the offer to travel together, admitting he is simply more comfortable being alone. Turan assures him it's no problem at all, and offers a sincere, "Thank you for everything." With a warm, fatherly smile, Kiorn bids him a final farewell. "Turan, take care." The boy returns the smile, expressing his hope that they can meet again on good terms in the future. After they part, Turan stands and watches Kiorn's retreating figure for a long time. It's only in that moment of departure that he realizes why he disliked the knight speaking to him so formally. A flashback reveals that, having lacked affection from his mother, he had been secretly yearning for a father figure. He understood then that in Kiorn, he had found a role model, someone who could show him what kind of man he should strive to become. Now truly alone for the first time, Turan begins his journey into the vast, unknown wasteland. After traveling for some time under the harsh sun, he pulls back his hood to survey the landscape. Suddenly, his keen shepherd's eyes spot something moving in the distance. He sees a group of travelers and assumes they might be merchants moving between villages. Deciding this is a good opportunity, he quickens his pace towards them. His plan is simple: approach the group and ask for directions to the nearest city. The lead traveler, a man with a scarred eye patch, demands to know who he is, and Turan politely explains he's a lone traveler seeking directions. The man points the way towards a city called Mure, information which Turan accepts. After thanking them, he turns to leave, but the group subtly repositions themselves to block his path. "Wait," one of the men says, stepping directly in front of him. He aggressively asks if he really thinks he can just leave after getting information from them. Turan looks back coolly, asking, "Then?" as the man smirks that when you receive something, you must give something in return. In an instant, the supposed travelers draw their swords, revealing their true nature as they completely surround him. One of them demands his bulging bag, and when Turan identifies them as bandits, they brazenly confirm it. The leader grins menacingly, calling it recklessness and reminding Turan that in a wasteland like this, no one would find it strange if he died. A blade is held to his throat as a bandit nicely tells him to hand over his belongings to avoid getting bloody. With cold calculation, Turan notes that these are not just robbers, but bandits who are fully prepared to kill. His mind flashes back to his recent magic lessons with Kiorn, specifically, the principle of using a cause like fire to achieve an effect like death. He recalls the entire lecture on causality and the proper application of deadly magic. Seeing this as the perfect chance to test his new knowledge, he thinks, "I'll have to use you guys for practice." And as he prepares to unleash his deadly magic on the unsuspecting bandits, a sinister, eager smile spreads across his face. He listens with amusement as the bandits mock his confidence. Their leader laughs at his audacity, ridiculing the idea that a lone traveler could possibly be a wizard. As one of the bandits rushes forward, Turan simply utters a single word to cast his spell, wind. Instantly, an immense gust of wind erupts from him, effortlessly blasting the entire group off their feet. After that, our guide quickly analyzes his technique, realizing that shaping the wind with his hand is a far more efficient use of mana. Stunned by the power he summoned with so little effort, he watches as the dazed bandits struggle to comprehend what just happened. Switching tactics, he calmly draws water from his flask, preparing a new kind of attack. With a flash of blue light, he instantly freezes the water into a razor-sharp ice projectile. He then unleashes a volley of magical ice shards, ready to end the fight. One of the bandits looks on in pure terror as the deadly projectiles fly toward him. The ice shards tear through the men with lethal force, their screams cut short. Turan muses that while the spell worked, he feels his old method of simply throwing stones is still faster and stronger. The leader of the bandits, finally understanding the danger, drops to his knees and begs the powerful wizard for mercy. The once arrogant men now grovel at his feet, promising anything if he'll just spare their lives, while the other bandits leap behind our guy for an ambush attack. But in just an instant, pillars of stone erupt from the ground, decimating them all. At this, their leader can only stare in disbelief at the sight of his slaughtered men, muttering, "Impossible." In an instant, all his men are dead. Our guy then approaches the terrified leader, the sole survivor, and tells him he has one last question. He asks the bandit why they so recklessly attacked a lone traveler who could have easily been a powerful wizard. The bandit's answer, "Because you bowed your head," catches Turan completely off guard, and explains that his politeness, despite their rudeness, marked him as a weak, ordinary person and an easy target. Our guy takes this harsh lesson to heart, thanking the bandit for teaching him something valuable about how the world truly works. Mistaking this for a sign of mercy, the bandit leader desperately asks if his life will be spared. Instead of an answer, the man looks up in horror as Turan conjures a single drop of water above his head. As he does, he recalls a parting conversation with his mentor, Kior, who warned him about the kinds of people he would meet on his journey. Kior's words echo in his mind, "Never show mercy to scum like bandits who profit from harming others." The memory of his mentor's firm conviction solidifies his resolve. Standing over the bandit's corpse, he understands the grim logic. Sparing one evil person could endanger 10 innocent ones. His grim task complete, he decides he's delayed long enough and resumes his journey. Following the clear wheel tracks left in the sand, he walks away from the scene of the massacre. As he walks, the path serves as a sharp reminder of the violence that just occurred. The weight of his actions settles in as he confronts a stark reality. For the first time, he has killed people. Though he feels a pang of guilt, he knows he couldn't let them go after remembering Kior's solemn warning, and accepts that those who rob and kill for profit would have simply continued to prey on others if he had let them live. By focusing on Kior's teachings, he manages to calm his chaotic thoughts and find peace with his decision. Leaving the desert wasteland behind, he stands on the precipice of a new, green world. After a long and bloody journey, he has finally arrived at the start of his new life, and he is left speechless, awestruck by the sight of civilization before him. For the first time, he lays his eyes on his destination, the small city of Murray. Walking through the bustling streets, he is overwhelmed, having never seen so many people in one place. He then marvels at the grand architecture, a world away from the simple buildings of his village. Surrounded by the sights and sounds of the market, it finally sinks in that he's truly arrived in a city. Remembering his need for lodging, he approaches a fruit vendor to ask for directions, and politely clarifies to the welcoming vendor that he isn't there to shop. After all, he recalls his mentor Kior's practical advice to always find an inn first when arriving in a new town. However, the vendor's friendly demeanor vanishes, and he rudely tells him to leave if he's not buying anything. Confused by the sudden hostility, the sheltered young man wonders if it's some unspoken city custom to make a purchase before asking a question. Playing along, he asks for the price of an apple, which the vendor quotes at 2 dupat. Noting his confusion over the local currency, the vendor says he'll accept other coins. Once money is exchanged, the vendor's attitude softens completely, and he gives Turan clear directions to the inn. Following the directions, he soon arrives at the largest pub and inn in the city. There, he is welcomed inside by a cheerful inn staff member named Lena. After she compliments his appearance, he wastes no time and asks how much a room costs for the night. Lena quotes a price of 16 dupat, and he, unconcerned with the cost, readily agrees to stay. More importantly, he says there's something he wants to ask. Hoping to continue his training and earn some money, he asks if there are any monsters with bounties on them nearby. He remembers Kior's guidance that hunting monsters is the key to both absorbing mana and making a living. Lena pauses, a sly smile appearing on her face as she subtly pockets one of his coins. She then reminds him that information isn't free, holding out a pamphlet for the city hall. Having never heard the term before, Turan questions what a city hall is. Seated with a drink, he asks the innkeeper for an explanation. Lena finds his ignorance endearing, realizing just how sheltered his life in the countryside has been. She then explains that city halls are administrative centers where officials handle public affairs for the city's lord, and advises him to visit the city hall in the morning to find information on monster bounties. Her curiosity piqued, she then asks him if he is a monster hunter, a term he's never heard before. She explains the popular legend that ordinary people can become wizards by hunting monsters, assuming this is his goal. Turan, who became a wizard through his bloodline, dismisses her story as mere superstition. Suddenly, a burly monster hunter named Maidan interrupts, insisting that it is a fact, claiming he saw someone become a wizard by killing monsters himself. However, she is shocked to see him alive, At this, he says that he is not going to die until he becomes a wizard. In his excitement, he pats Turan on the shoulder, then quickly apologizes for his forwardness. His interest sparked by this new information, Turan asks the man to tell him more about his claim. Maidan explains the common theory. If wizards get stronger from hunting monsters, then it must be possible for anyone to become a wizard the same way. After that, he states, pointing to his companions, "Therefore, the four of us will hunt monsters to become wizards." Turan asks if anyone in their city has actually succeeded, but Maidan admits that the only wizards around serve the city's lord. The hunter then sizes Turan up, questioning his shabby gear and asking if he even has a weapon to hunt with. In response, Turan calmly presents his well-worn sling, his weapon of choice. Inspecting the simple weapon, Maidan assumes it's only useful for hunting small animals like rabbits or foxes. Believing him to be just a novice shooter, Maidan invites him to join their hunting party. Turan responds with a polite but knowing smile, well aware of the vast difference in their power. Later that night in his room, he reflects on the offer and declines it internally, seeing no reason to hunt with them. He sighs, exhausted from the chaotic events of his first day away from home. Looking at his traveler's pack, the reality that he's truly left his old life behind begins to sink in. As mana crackles in his hand, he quietly wonders what his future as a wizard will hold. Just then, a sudden knock on his door startles him from his thoughts, and he immediately reminds himself of Kiorn's warning to never let his guard down. Kiorn's voice echoes in his mind, warning him that being inside a city's walls doesn't guarantee safety. He remembers his promise to Kiorn to never lower his guard. Heeding the lesson, he cautiously approaches the door with a spell already prepared. He then warily peers through the crack of the door to see his late-night visitor. His eyes widen in surprise when he recognizes the person on the other side. He opens the door to find Lena, the inn staff member, who asks with a blush if he was sleeping. With a suggestive tone, she tells him she came to his room to keep him warm. Completely naive to her intentions, he can only stare back in utter confusion. As Lena begins to undo the front of her dress, the bewildered young man asks her what she means. Standing by the door, he naively asks her to clarify her intentions, completely missing the romantic subtext. She offers to do whatever he wants for a bit of money, but he simply replies, "What if there's nothing I want?" Undeterred, Lena gets closer, telling him not to lie because she can see the desire on his face. In response, he comically attains a state of pure enlightenment as his face morphs into a passionless, Buddha-like mask. She is left completely speechless and flustered by his utter lack of interest. Turan then suddenly recalls Kiorn's frantic past warnings about the dangers of giving in to temptation. He remembers Kiorn's very specific and somewhat paranoid advice to be careful with inmates due to the risk of sexually transmitted diseases. The lesson continues in his memory, with Kiorn explaining that while wizards have strong disease resistance, they could still pass illnesses to others. With his mentor's final warning not to let desire lead to regret echoing in his mind, Turan makes his decision. A defeated Lena stomps away, while Turan reflects on the cold, transactional nature of city life. Lying in bed later, he concludes that cities are indeed cold-hearted places where even conversation comes with a price tag. However, his thoughts are interrupted when he overhears a curious conversation from a nearby room. One of Maidan's crew members questions why their boss wanted to bring Turan along, doubting his usefulness. Another man jokes that Turan's cockiness would make him perfect monster bait, all while our protagonist overhears every word. But Maidan reveals his true, kind-hearted motive. Turan's use of a sling reminded him of his younger self, and it made him worry. And admits he just wanted to keep the young man close to help him survive longer, which his men simply chalk up to him being too good-hearted. Having heard everything, a small smile creeps across Turan's face. His opinion of the city softens, and he realizes maybe it isn't so cold-hearted after all. The next day, Turan arrives at the city's official administrative office to register as a monster hunter. He approaches the front desk, where a receptionist formally asks how he may be of service. Turan's blunt question about the man's job title is met with a dry, sarcastic response. So he gets straight to the point, stating his intention to hunt monsters, which clearly surprises the official. As he waits, our protagonist reflects on Kiorn's warning that the world wouldn't be kind to him. His mentor had explained that there's no inherent reason for people to be kind. He also remembers Kiorn's advice that revealing he's a wizard would garner immediate respect, but he chooses to keep his identity hidden. The receptionist returns and hands him a monster bounty notice. The official tells him that he can't take the notice with him and must return it after reading. Looking at the crude drawing, Turan asks if it's a crow monster, to which the receptionist sarcastically confirms it's not a cat. The receptionist then gives the standard warning that monster corpses must be brought back to the city to prevent them from turning into wraiths. Turan confidently assures the man that he's aware of the law and its severe penalty. After all, he grimly recalls his near-death battle against the Wraith, determined not to let that happen again. When he asks why the city's knights don't handle it, the receptionist scoffs at the very idea that they would have time to spare, and clarifies that a knight's duty is to maintain public order within the city walls. The official dismissively concludes that hunting monsters outside the city is a job for thugs like him. As Turan walks away, the receptionist mutters to himself, fully expecting to hear news of another dead hunter soon enough. But just moments later, the corpse of the crow monster, a clean hole blown through its chest, thuds onto the office floor. The receptionist and his colleagues can only stare down at the fresh kill in utter disbelief. They crowd around the monster's body, shocked that he managed to hunt it and return so quickly. When asked if he killed it alone, Turan nonchalantly confirms it. He then inquires about his bounty, sending the flustered officials scrambling to pay him. He hastily hands over a pouch of coins, and Turan accepts it with a simple thanks. Meanwhile, the other officials marvel at the pristine condition of the corpse, noting that its valuable blade wings are completely intact. As they inspect the body, the head receptionist is surprised to see our hunter still standing there. Just then, Turan simply asks if there are any other monsters worth hunting, leaving the officials completely dumbfounded. Startled, they ask, "You can still hunt more?" After his successful hunts, Turan celebrates by ordering a massive feast featuring the inn's most expensive dishes. Lena is floored by his success, exclaiming that she can't believe he defeated 30 monsters in only 3 days. While he happily enjoys his meal, she comments that he must have made a fortune. Turan pauses his meal, however, to clarify that money isn't his primary motivation, and states plainly that his true objective is to absorb the mana from the monsters he kills. He then reflects on his recent progress, acknowledging that absorbing all that mana has definitely made him stronger. In fact, he can feel that his mana has increased several times over since he first left the mountain with Kior. However, he also senses he's reaching a plateau, realizing that the mana from these weak monsters is no longer sufficient for his growth. As he contemplates his next move, Lena timidly tries to get his attention, and in awe, she jokes about how the skinny-looking young man managed to eat the entire feast by himself. The innkeeper also compliments Turan's impressive appetite and says he's glad that he enjoyed the meal. Turan praises the delicious food, and in return, the innkeeper promises to cook him an even better meal next time. Just as he stands to leave, however, his cloak is roughly grabbed from behind. This is the thug Frim Maidan party states that our guy is eating tasty by himself. The lead thug sneers, mentioning that he's heard about Turan's recent financial success. But before he finishes his demand for charity, Turan slams him on the mouth. As the man screams, his companions curse in shock at our guy. Turan then sarcastically asks, "Is this the charity they were looking for?" Another hunter throws a punch, telling him not to get cocky. Yet with minimal effort, he dodges the punch and delivers a disabling blow of his own. The last conscious thug grabs a stool, intending to use it as a makeshift weapon. Turan, however, effortlessly stops the attack by deflecting the stool with his hand, and with a single, magically enhanced flick of his fingers, he sends the final attacker flying, ending the fight instantly. Lena begins to scold the brawlers, and finally erupts, screaming at them not to fight inside her inn. Later, a humbled Maidan and his crew bow deeply, offering Turan a sincere apology for the trouble. He assures him that he's reprimanded his men and that such an incident will never happen again. He then explains that his crew has been struggling financially and simply became jealous of Turan's success. At Maidan's insistence, the bruised thugs mumble a reluctant apology. Turan asks if their situation is truly that difficult, and Maidan admits they've been struggling lately. He confesses that they're on the verge of being unable to pay for their room, but insists it's their own problem to solve. In an unexpected act of kindness, Turan offers him a large pouch of money. When a stunned Maidan asks why, Turan explains it's a thank you for his earlier kindness and concern. Maidan is shocked that Turan knew his true intentions, but the young man shrewdly notes that nothing is ever truly free. In exchange for the money, he asks for information, and a grateful Maidan eagerly agrees to tell him everything he knows. Having gathered the information he needs, Turan prepares to depart from the city of Murray. He stands at the edge of the woods, ready for his journey to the next city, and muses that this will likely be his last hunt in the area. With the information from Maidan, he now knows his destination and feels it's time to move on. He reflects on their conversation, pleased that he not only received useful intel, but also confirmed that Maidan is a genuinely good person. Turan finds his kindness purer than Kiorn's seasoned pragmatism, a quality he appreciates, but his peaceful thoughts are shattered as his eyes widen in alarm. A sudden, sickening smell wafts through the air, putting him on high alert. Hoping his sudden, terrible hunch is wrong, he dashes into the forest to investigate. There, he discovers deep, vicious claw marks gouged into a tree, confirming his fears of a powerful monster. He stands grimly in the now silent woods, knowing something is terribly wrong. His search soon leads him to a gruesome sight, the blood-soaked corpse of a man slumped against a tree. With a sinking feeling, he immediately recognizes the dead hunter as a member of Midan's crew. However, he silently surveys the horrific scene, processing the sudden violence. The dead man's eyes are frozen open in a look of shock and terror. A few coins, likely his last earnings, lie scattered in the blood next to his lifeless hand. Kneeling beside the corpse of his new acquaintance, Midan, Turan wonders what could have possibly happened. Just then, a faint sound alerts him to a single, gravely wounded survivor from the hunting party. With his dying breath, the hunter reveals the unlikely culprit behind the massacre, a rabbit. As Turan surveys the bloody aftermath, he spots the silhouette of a monster lurking nearby. The killer reveals itself, a massive, blood-soaked rabbit with terrifying, glowing red eyes. Yet, unfazed by the creature's appearance, he calmly prepares to face his new opponent. The monstrous rabbit launches itself forward, charging at him with blinding speed. He's caught off guard by the creature's startling velocity. Narrowly dodging the first assault, he notes that he almost got hit. Wasting no time, he readies his sling for a counterattack. He whips a mana-infused stone through the air, aiming it directly at the beast. The stone, infused with magical mana, moves directly toward its target. It then splits into multiple bolts as it owns in on its target. To his surprise, however, the monster skillfully deflects every single shot with its tail and claws. Our guide deduces that this creature must be experienced in defending against thrown weapon techniques. Suddenly, the rabbit leaps high into the air, its body swelling to a colossal size as it prepares to crush him from above. Its massive red eye widens in shock as it sees our guy has disappeared from his place. The monster lands on the ground, desperately searching for our guy. Suddenly, Turan appears behind him and attacks with a mana-enhanced punch. The rabbit lets out a pained shriek as the unexpected blow connects. Just then, our guy leaps back. However, the fight isn't over. The monster lunges at our guy to attack. But our guy effortlessly dodges it by disappearing with blinding speed, and the monster cuts the trees instead of our guy. As the monster launches flurry of attacks, but all is vain. Amidst the chaos, the rabbit's pained shriek echoes, revealing that he has been fatally wounded. Suddenly, the monster collapses, blood pouring from its mouth as it finally succumbs to its injuries. Turan emerges from behind the beast, revealing he delivered the fatal blow during their high-speed clash. With the battle won, he reaches out to absorb the monster's mana. A massive torrent of green energy swirls around him as he draws in the creature's power, and he's shocked to discover its mana is even more potent than that of the shadow leper he first encountered. As the mana absorption finishes, Turan looks over at the dying hunter, still in disbelief. The lone survivor, having witnessed the incredible battle, correctly identifies him as a wizard. Turan confirms it, prompting the hunter to ask why he's hiding his true nature. But Turan asks the dying man if he has any family to deliver his belongings to, but the hunter tearfully replies that he has no one. With his final breath, he calls out for his leader, Midan. This reminds Turan of Midan mentioning a great city called Orum, which houses a grand library. And the library contains thousands of books. Midan had playfully noted that he only seemed interested once books were brought up. He'd also explained that access to the library was restricted, which had intrigued our protagonist. But the crucial piece of information was that only wizards were allowed inside, a fact that stuck with him. Recalling this conversation solidifies his next course of action. Standing in the clearing, he announces his decision to go to the great city of Orum. Before leaving, however, he pays his respects, creating makeshift graves for Midan and his fallen party members, and says a final, quiet goodbye to his friend. Wishing him peace in the afterlife, he turns and begins his journey to Orum. Sometime later, he arrives in Orum with a group of fellow travelers blending into the crowd. He is immediately awestruck by the scale of the city, realizing just how small his village of Murray was in comparison. The great city of Orum is a massive metropolis centered around a magnificent palace. As he approaches the main gate, he's surprised by the long line of people waiting for entry. Watching the guards, he assumes they must be screening for wanted criminals. He then remarks to himself that a great city would naturally have a more robust security system. But as he reaches the gate, a guard abruptly stops him. Turan calmly asks what the problem is. The guard points a finger at him, flatly denying him entry. Citing his filthy clothes, the guard mocks him, telling him to go clean himself up. Ignoring the rude guard, his attention is captured by the sight of the library, a massive, vine-covered tower. He realizes this must be the library Midan had described. However, he's overwhelmed by the building's grandeur, correctly assuming it was constructed using magic. He then approaches the library's ornate doors, which are flanked by 2 guards. When he states his intention to enter, one of the guards informs him that only wizards are permitted inside. So Turan calmly declares, "I'm a wizard," leaving the guard momentarily speechless. The guard then scoffs, angrily accusing him of being a lunatic and warning him that impersonating a wizard is a capital offense. Dismissively, he tries to push Turan away, insisting that someone like him could never become a wizard. To settle the matter, Turan simply begins to emanate a powerful, red magical aura from his hand. He recalls Kior's lesson: wizards can recognize each other by sensing their mana. And so, he unleashes a fraction of his oppressive power, revealing his true nature. The guard is immediately overwhelmed by the immense pressure, struggling to breathe. Just then, he collapses as his partner rushes to help and asks if he's alright. Lying on the ground in terror, the guard realizes he's in the presence of a wizard who is at least noble class. The guard, Kenya, hastily introduces himself as a knight of House Valtas and formally asks which house Turan belongs to. Turan asks if he needs to state his house to enter, and Kenya confirms he does not. Kenya then explains that library access requires permission from the master of House Valtas, who manages it. Agreeing to the proceedings, Turan is escorted to the Valtas estate to prepare for an audience. While soaking in a luxurious bath, he laments how complicated this simple goal has become. Meanwhile, the maids tasked with bathing him blush profusely at his physique. Our protagonist is bewildered by his current situation, wondering how he ended up being attended to by a flock of maids. Feeling awkward, he asks them to stop, and they immediately comply. He asks to wash by himself, but the head maid explains they will be punished if they fail to properly serve an esteemed guest. Seeing no other choice, he reluctantly agrees and tells them to do as they wish. The magnificent Valtas estate, where Turan is being hosted, is shown in all its glory. After being dressed in fine clothes, a maid is audibly stunned by his handsome appearance. Realizing her lack of composure, she quickly covers her mouth in embarrassment. Now looking every bit the nobleman, Turan asks if there's a problem. The flustered maid apologizes, explaining she was momentarily captivated by his beauty. Turan dismisses the apology, but she politely reminds him not to speak to them so casually, given his now apparent status. Looking in a mirror, even Turan is surprised by his own reflection. He is then led into a grand hall where a young noblewoman with pink hair awaits him. The woman smirks, identifying him as the guest who showed up looking like a beggar. She then playfully compliments his transformation, remarking that he now looks like a prince. The two introduce themselves. He is Turan, and she is Azella. When Azella asks which house he belongs to, Turan declines to answer for personal reasons. His secrecy only piques her interest further, and she smiles slyly. Intrigued by the mysterious guest, she decides to play a little prank to test him. Without warning, she unleashes a powerful burst of orange mana that fills the entire room. With a confident and mischievous glint in her eyes, she issues a challenge. She demands that the startled Turan show her his mana. In response, he unleashes his own power, his eyes flaring with an intense, overwhelming blue light. Their immense mana 1 blue, 1 gold clashes violently in a spectacular display of raw power. The resulting shockwave sends the household staff flying, unable to withstand the pressure. As the display ends, he finally lets out a breath, having successfully proven his strength. Azella, however, is far from intimidated. In fact, she's utterly impressed by his power. She lets out a hearty laugh, genuinely thrilled by the power she just witnessed. Now facing him as an equal, she gets his full attention with a simple, "Hey." Completely swept up in the moment, she impulsively asks the bewildered shepherd, "Want to marry me?" Turan is left speechless, utterly confused by the sudden and unexpected marriage proposal. Seeing his reaction, she quickly tries to play it off as a joke, much to her butler's silent disapproval. Despite her backtracking, she slyly tells him to seriously consider her offer, cheekily noting that the seat next to her is currently available. Our guy watches thoughtfully as the eccentric noblewoman and her entourage depart. Left alone, he quietly contemplates the strange and powerful young lady he's just met. Looking at his hand, he is shocked to realize she possesses mana on par with his own, wondering if this is a normal level for nobility. Later, Turan is brought before the lord of the house in a grand and intimidating office. The Lord of Orum, Rug Valtas, formally welcomes the young man to his estate. Turan introduces himself and confirms his wish to use the family's famous library. But Lord Valtas attempts to temper his expectations, warning him that the library contains no secret magic or methods to increase mana. Turan assures the Lord he has no such desires, and with that, Rug grants him permission to enter. Suggesting he rest for the day, the Lord extends his hospitality, which Turan graciously accepts. The next day, his entry pass is confirmed, and the guards formally welcome him to the Sky Library. Then, the massive, ornate doors to the legendary library swing open before him. His eyes widen in absolute awe as he takes in the magnificent sight. He gazes up at a seemingly infinite spiral of bookshelves stretching high into the tower. Standing in the vast, stone-floored hall, he finally comprehends the sheer scale of the library. A cheerful voice suddenly greets him by name, breaking the silence of the grand hall. A small, pale girl with long black hair excitedly introduces herself as the librarian. She informs him that by order of the Lord, she will explain the simple rules of the library. He is taken aback that a small child is the librarian as she lists the rules: don't damage anything and don't take books out. Getting uncomfortably close, she says she'll be watching him constantly, prompting an uneasy Turan to ask for some personal space. When he asks if she's familiar with the books, she proudly boasts that her greatest skill is finding whatever people need. She then offers suggestions, asking if he's interested in romance or history. Continuing her list, she cheekily asks if he'd perhaps like something erotic, leaving Turan unimpressed. But he simply states that he wants to learn basic common sense about the world, a request that puzzles the librarian. She explains that most books are too old for that, but directs him to a section that might help, and he thanks her. As she says her welcome, he picks up his very first book. Holding the tome in his hands, he marvels at the simple object, thinking, so this is what a book is. As he cracks open the cover, he is immediately captivated. A genuine smile spreads across his face as he discovers the amazing new world of reading. And so, Turan establishes a daily routine, spending all his time engrossed in the books within the Sky Library. Through his reading, he learns about the world's geography and its many fantastical races. His studies expand to include the complex etiquette of wizards and the various cultures of the world. He devours knowledge about monsters, ancient relics, and the history of the old empire. With every page turned, the vast, unknown world becomes clearer and more vivid in his mind. Later, summoned back to the Lord's office, Rug Valtus remarks on how well Turan has been utilizing the library, and reminds him that allowing him access to the library was a significant act of goodwill. The time has come, Rug declares, to receive payment for that goodwill, and Turan calmly asks what he needs. The Lord reveals that a dangerous monster has appeared north of Orum and is preying on travelers. Turan understands he is being asked to hunt it, and Rug confirms the task is serious, as 4 of his knights have already been eaten, and tells him that it seems a noble will have to step in personally, but their house can only mobilize 2 people at the moment. Then he asks, please tell me what he needs. Turan readily accepts the mission, stating his belief that protecting people is a wizard's duty. However, he recalls from his studies that wizards don't typically involve themselves in such local matters, sensing that something is off. Rug explains the urgency: the monster has blocked an important trade route for 10 days, and it must be reopened quickly. Turan puts the pieces together, realizing the Lord's goodwill was a calculated move to secure his help from the very beginning. And so, a subjugation party, led by Turan and Azella, sets out from the city gates to hunt the monster. Azella stretches, commenting to herself on her father's cunning nature. She complains aloud, asking her retainers if they seem so unreliable that her father had to recruit a guest for the hunt. She then quickly clarifies that she isn't blaming them, but merely thinks her father is making an unnecessary fuss. His brother teases her about calling the Lord fussy, but she sharply tells him to drop it. He seems taken aback by her sharp retort. Ignoring his sister, Marvin Valthus introduces himself to Turan, and the two agree to work together. As the party heads into the forest, Azella declares her intention to finish the hunt quickly so they can all go home. Marvin mischievously asks Turan if he's interested in his sister, only for Turan to give a blunt and immediate no. Visibly relieved, Marvin is glad to hear that Turan has no romantic interest in his fiery older sister. The knights suddenly call for a halt as the party comes across a disturbance on the path ahead. They discover the grim scene of an attack, a completely destroyed merchant's wagon. The knights deduce the merchants must have come from the south, since the northern road was blocked before being attacked. Meanwhile, Turan carefully studies the wreckage, searching for clues about their attacker. His eyes land on a large, distinct handprint seared into a wooden plank. Based on the evidence, he confidently identifies the monster as a monkey. When Azella expresses her doubt, he simply points out the clear handprint left at the scene. He lays out his theory: the monkey attacked the peddlers and retreated into the forest, so they should be able to track it. However, both Azella and Marvin admit they aren't skilled with tracking magic. Stepping forward, Turan surprises them by volunteering to track the beast himself. When asked if he's from a bloodline known for tracking, he simply states that he uses it often and is therefore used to it. Just then, he closes his eyes, focusing his mana to cast a search spell. His eyes flash with power as the spell takes effect. A wave of mana emanates from him, revealing the monster's spectral trail leading deeper into the woods. Having locked onto the trail, he confidently points the way for the subjugation party. The trail, however, abruptly ends at a stream, leading him to conclude the creature washed itself to cover its tracks. Azella is shocked by the implication, finding it hard to believe a mere beast could possess such intelligence. Turan calmly posits that maybe the creature simply wanted to take a bath. Suddenly, his senses scream as he detects an imminent threat. He whirls around, shouting a desperate warning to Marvin and Azella, "Behind you." A monstrous, red-eyed ape ambushes the party from the trees. The knights brace for impact, caught completely by surprise by the beast's sudden appearance. The monster ape roars as it prepares a devastating attack. Its hands are ready to hurl stones at them. A knight captain frantically screams for his men to dodge the incoming assault. But the stones tear through them all, sending them flying before they can even react. Turan deftly leaps away from the attack, his instincts having saved him. He lands safely, his expression grim as he takes in the bloody aftermath. Azella uses the other knights as a barrier to save herself while they lose their lives. After using them, she shoves them away. As he witnesses the brutal reality of this world, Turan grimly acknowledges that his mother's warnings were not an exaggeration. Taking command of the chaotic situation, a furious Azella orders the remaining forces to attack the monster. The knights charge forward. However, the intelligent beast unexpectedly turns and flees the battle. The remaining knights give chase, determined not to let the monster escape. Seeing his opportunity, Turan prepares his secret weapon, a magically enhanced sling. As the hunting party struggles to keep up, Azella yells that the beast is too fast and they're losing it. Suddenly, a streak of brilliant blue energy rockets past Azella, flying towards the escaping monster. His magically charged stone soars through the forest, homing in on its target. The monster lets out a shriek of agony as the projectile strikes true, tearing through his body and passing out the other side. Azella and Marvin can only stare in disbelief at his incredible marksmanship. Just then, Turan appears in a clearing ahead, a disc of mana swirling in his hand as he prepares to confront the wounded beast. With his target cornered, he calmly prepares to finish the fight. The monster ape, now thoroughly enraged and injured, is sent tumbling by the force of his initial attack. Seizing the opportunity, a determined Azella reaches out to cast her spell, shouting, "Die." Together, she and Marvin combine their powers, unleashing their bloodline ability to summon a colossal, coiling serpent made of pure flame. The fiery serpent then engulfs the monster ape in a massive, devastating explosion that lights up the entire forest. Our guy watches the inferno, correctly identifying the impressive display as the bloodline ability of House Voltas, the Pyromaniacs. As the flames die down, the surviving knights breathe a collective sigh of relief, realizing the grueling battle is finally over. Azella approaches him, admitting with a smile that his surprise rock attack gave her quite a scare. The siblings quickly fall back into their usual banter, with she teasing him for screaming like a little girl during the fight. Elsewhere, the battered knights tend to their numerous injuries, patching up everything from bleeding heads to grievously wounded limbs. Turan surveys the wounded knights and remarks that despite the mess, they were lucky to have no casualties. And notes that for a surprise attack, they got away with relatively few serious injuries. However, he privately observes that the mana-enhanced siblings didn't hesitate to use the weaker knights as human shields. Noticing his pensive look, Marvin asks what's on his mind. Deciding against voicing his critical thoughts, he simply dismisses the question, "No, it's nothing." Putting the battle behind them, Azella excitedly gestures for him to join them in absorbing the monster's mana. So the three wizards gather around the massive, smoldering corpse to begin the ritual. Our guy places his hand on the beast, channeling its residual energy and beginning the absorption process. And he confirms what he'd read in a book: absorbing mana as a group doesn't seem to reduce the amount each person receives. Soon, Azella and Marvin reach their growth limits, complaining that they can't absorb any more of the potent mana. Marvin watches in awe as Turan continues to absorb the mana, realizing his spell proficiency and mana capacity rival his own. Azella is stunned to see a noble who hasn't even reached his growth limit effortlessly, absorbing all the remaining mana. With the mission accomplished, the subjugation party makes their way back towards the grand estate of House Valtas. On the way, Marvin gives Turan full credit for the victory, from tracking the beast to landing the decisive blow. But Turan humbly brushes off the praise, insisting his contribution wasn't anything spectacular. He then expresses regret, wishing he had noticed the monster's surge ability sooner to prevent its initial surprise attack. Surprised, Marvin asks if the monster truly had a surge ability, a detail that he and his sister completely missed. Turan explains his theory that monsters awaken different abilities based on their external traits. He deduces that this one's large hands and eyes granted it powerful throwing and long-range sight abilities. Impressed by the quick analysis, Marvin praises his intellect, but Turan admits he just read about it in a monster encyclopedia. Marvin and her sister scoff at the idea of visiting the stuffy library, recalling a boring childhood visit that had ended abruptly. Turan cheerfully suggests that next time, they should ask the librarian for help finding easier books. Hearing this, Azella seems intrigued and slightly suspicious, questioning him about this mysterious librarian he met. At this he pauses, realizing from their reactions that the Volta siblings, who own the library, have no idea who the librarian is. Later, he arrives back at the imposing, vine-covered tower of the Sky Library. Inside, the enigmatic librarian materializes to welcome him back, calling him by name. However, he immediately grows suspicious, realizing that no commoner or knight would ever address a noble so casually by their first name. And also privately notes that her cheerful, almost eerie demeanor doesn't fit the typical image of a librarian. Putting his suspicions into words, he directly asks the girl how she knows his name. She feigns surprise, as if the answer should have been obvious. With a sly grin, she asks, "You only notice now?" confirming that she is far more than she appears. She then explains that she simply learned his name from the entry permit he used to enter the library. Demonstrating her power, she clarifies that her gaze reaches everywhere within the library's domain. As a glowing book floats from her hand onto a high shelf, Turan asks how he should properly address her. She casually replies that she doesn't have a name, so he can call her whatever he wants, and playfully suggests a cute name like My Love, but our ever-stoic protagonist decides to stick with Librarian, much to her mock disappointment. She then teases him for suddenly acting so polite after using her for days, a claim he flatly denies. He tells her not to get so close, admitting her forwardness is a bit much for him to handle. That's when she reveals her true nature, explaining that she isn't a person but a spirit that has taken the form of the library. After that, she elaborates on the definition of a spirit, a soul that inhabits something neither truly alive nor dead. Floating high above the library floor, she declares, in other words, the library itself is me, and clarifies that this form is just for comfortable communication. Basically, it's the user's preferences. Turan dismisses her teasing, but she insists that while her form may not be his preference, her existence is like a reflection in water. Pondering this new information, he decides to test the limits of her incorporeal form. To both of their surprise, his hand makes solid contact with her spiritual form. She yelps, asking where he's touching and commenting on the weird sensation, which confirms she can be physically interacted with. Annoyed, she complains about her limitations, specifically that she can't directly exert power on intruders, and grumbles that if she could, she would have punished every last person who carelessly took books out of the library. Turan deduces that not even House Valtas, let alone any previous users, knew about her existence. At this, she explains that's because no one until him has had the qualifications to perceive her. Her creator designed her to be visible only to those whose type is complete beyond a certain level, making his ability to see her a very romantic notion in her eyes. Intrigued, he asks, what does she mean by type? She replies, it's what wizards call bloodline. Eager for answers, he asks if she can tell him about his bloodline, explaining that he's an orphan with no parents to ask. The librarian agrees to check for him, stating she just needs his consent to examine his body. He is taken aback by the strange request, and thinks this is really how the examination is done. Then, she suddenly shoves her entire hand directly into his chest, causing him to cry out in shock. Exclaiming, "Wow, we're connected," she probes his essence while he, though startled, notes that it doesn't hurt. The library spirit reports her findings, confirming that the main components of his bloodline are pursuer and hunter traits of House Zahar. But as she examines him further, her eyes widen in surprise when she discovers something unexpected, a second bloodline, and exclaims that his bloodline was mixed, leaving a stunned Turan to ask what she means. She then explains that he's the result of two people with different bloodlines, but she can't identify the second one because it's still locked. However, she reassures him that a locked bloodline isn't uncommon in mixed-blood individuals and will likely open naturally as he grows stronger. Turan processes this monumental news, finally understanding a piece of his hidden heritage. His thoughts immediately turn to his mother, who he now suspects was more than just a simple commoner. He recalls that his mother was far too polite and educated to be a commoner, theorizing she was a descendant of a noble whose bloodline was too diluted to hold mana. Turan thanks the librarian for the information, but she cheekily asks him to stay for one more month as a sign of his gratitude. For the next month, his study habits change. Instead of reading alone, he constantly asks the library spirit for explanations. She proves to be an invaluable teacher, possessing knowledge from books lost for thousands of years, even teaching him how to see microorganisms by shaping water into a lens. For him, having the fundamental laws of nature explained in plain words is a treasure beyond measure. He learns about the existence of microorganisms, understanding that they are the cause of both disease and decay. His education extends to basic physics, as he grasps principles like the refraction of light and also learns about concepts like heat generation through friction and the biological processes of injury and healing. Putting this new knowledge to the test, he sits before an apple, preparing to experiment with the concept of decay. With a single touch, he channels his mana, applying his newfound understanding. In an instant, the once fresh apple withers and rots into a shriveled husk. He is amazed, realizing that while existing magic could do this, understanding the scientific principle behind it allows him to achieve the same result with far less mana. Simply changing his perception of the world and understanding its underlying laws has fundamentally raised his skill level as a wizard. After that, he speculates that powerful houses might be monopolizing this kind of scientific knowledge to maintain their competitive edge. The librarian muses that this would explain why the general level of knowledge seems to be dropping over time. Seeing how his power blossomed with just a bit of education, she now understands why such knowledge would be hoarded. Another month passes, and Turan decides it's finally time for him to leave the Sky Library. She is surprised to hear he's leaving, but he notes that Lord Valtus has been openly hinting for him to go. In a sudden outburst, the librarian begs him to take her with him, desperate not to be left alone again, and comically throws herself at his feet, pleading for him to help her escape her confinement. When asked if she can even leave, she admits she can't and tries to convince him to stay instead, an offer he quickly passes on. Pouting, she laments that he is too resolute to ever agree to stay with her. As a parting gift, she advises him to seek out the land's other legacies of the gods, as there might be spirits with even more knowledge than her own. As he walks towards the exit, he promises that he will come back to visit her from time to time. Trying to act nonchalant, she tells him to come if he wants, hiding her sadness at his departure. But he gives her a reassuring smile, telling her not to worry, as there are still so many books he hasn't read yet. Now clad in traveler's gear, Turan leaves the Valtus estate, his mind set on his next destination. Consulting a continental map he acquired from the library, he locates his target, the base of House Sahar in the Enril Desert, east of Orum. With a new sense of purpose, he sets off on his journey, determined to head to the home of his father's bloodline. His ultimate goal is clear, to travel to Zahar and find clues about the parents he never knew. Understanding the gravity of his quest, he decides to take his time, knowing that what has been lost for 18 years will not simply vanish overnight. While camping, he reflects that if any clues about his family still exist, a slight delay won't make a difference. However, his leisurely pace is quickly interrupted when he stumbles upon a grisly scene in the woods. His sharp senses alert him to a commotion nearby, drawing him from his path. So he cautiously peeks through the foliage, investigating the source of the disturbance. There, he discovers an incredibly muscular horse standing protectively over a fallen young man. He quickly assesses the scene, realizing the powerful horse is not an aggressor but a guardian, fending off two menacing figures, and marvels at the creature's strength, wondering how it can be so powerful while holding off two attackers. His interest piqued, our protagonist decides to observe the situation a while longer before revealing himself. The two attackers, a pair of dark elves, strategize on how to get past the formidable horse. Our guy recognizes them immediately. They are dark elves, a race he has only read about in books. One of the elves begins to chant, using foul magic, to raise monstrous creatures from the shadows of the earth. Recalling his studies, he identifies their magic as necromancy just as the summoned beasts emerge to attack the horse. Still, he hesitates to intervene, weighing the possibility that the fallen man might have provoked the attack himself. His uncertainty vanishes in an instant, however, as he witnesses a truly horrifying act. One of the dark elves casually begins to eat a severed human hand, revealing their depraved, cannibalistic nature. This vile nature is confirmed when the female elf asks for a piece, only for her companion to tell her to eat her own. Disgusted by their depravity, his mind is made up. He resolves to step in and put an end to this. Just then, he activates his Zahar bloodline ability, vanishing from sight with his signature stealth magic. Meanwhile, distracted and overconfident, the cannibalistic elves complain about the quality of their recent victims. Suddenly, a blast of purple energy slams into the male elf's head and pierces it. Confused, the other elf looks down at the splatter, unable to comprehend where the attack came from. Just then, the female elf quickly commands her reanimated monstrosities to gather for another assault. From his hiding spot in the trees, Turan launches his signature attack, a mana-infused stone from his sling. But one of the summoned beasts deflects the attack. The female elf screams into the woods, demanding her unseen attacker show themselves. Meanwhile, the beast charges forward for the attack. The female elf quickly deduces that their mysterious foe is using some form of stealth magic. To counter this, she uses another beast, preparing a wide-ranging attack to flush him out. She then unleashes a swirling area of effect attack, hoping to force the hidden wizard out of hiding. And her attack works. She spots a flicker in the air where her magic was disrupted. With his position revealed, he is forced to drop his stealth as the dark elf gloats, "Found you, demon," and immediately orders her summoned beast to converge on him and kill him. But not one to be easily cornered, Turan gathers mana and prepares a powerful fire spell. He unleashes a massive torrent of flame, instantly incinerating one of the charging beasts. While the fire spell was powerful, the second, more agile beast manages to dodge the blast. It then slams into Turan, sending him flying through the air. He grimly acknowledges his enemy's speed, thankful that he at least managed to take one out with his ambush. The impact leaves him winded, and he struggles to regain his footing. But before he can recover, the smaller fox-like beast lunges forward and sinks its teeth into his leg. However, he manages to land a solid kick, sending the demonic fox flying, and focuses his gaze, bracing for the next attack. The hulking bull beast bears down on him, its red eyes glowing with killing intent. As the bull hits, our guy is viciously slammed against a tree, the sheer force of the blow echoing through the forest. The powerful impact leaves him reeling and coughing up blood. Forced to his knees, he is left momentarily vulnerable before the beasts. The dark elf laughs maniacally at his plight, promising to make Turan beg for death for killing his Kel. But just as the elf gloats, the protective horse charges in and delivers a bone-shattering kick to his head. The elf screams for help as the horse relentlessly stomps him into the ground. The summoned beasts turn their attention to saving their master. With incredible speed and power, they lunge at the horse and strike. Beaten and humiliated, the dark elf vows to kill them all for this defeat. But before he can even react, a mana-infused stone pierces his head. Her vows cut short, however, as Turan, having recovered just enough, ends the threat permanently with a precise shot from his sling. As the final necromancer falls, her dark magic dissipates, leaving the horse standing victorious. Battered and bleeding, Turan lets out a sigh of relief, a weary smile on his face. Then the adrenaline fades, and the toll of the battle finally hits him as he collapses to the ground. Panting heavily, he admits to himself that the intense fight took a lot more out of him than he'd expected. The heroic horse cautiously approaches the exhausted young man. He gratefully pats the intelligent beast, offering a simple, yeah, thanks. Nearby, the young man who had been unconscious finally begins to stir. Sometime later, night has fallen over the forest. The young man jolts awake, finding himself sitting by a warm campfire. He sees Turan sitting across from him, calmly tending to the flames. Turan greets him, casually chewing on a piece of jerky. When asked who he is, Turan simply explains that he saw the attack by the Dark Elves and decided to intervene. The young nobleman is relieved to see his faithful companion Tilly is safe and sound by his side. Turan praises the horse, noting its remarkable intelligence and instinct to protect its master. The nobleman formally introduces himself as Aziz of House Berg and thanks Turan for saving his life. Now curious, Turan asks if there was a particular reason he was in conflict with the Dark Elves. Aziz explains there was no reason. He and his retainers were simply on a pilgrimage when the elves ambushed them without provocation. Overcome with grief, he laments that while he'd heard other races were savage, he never imagined they could be so cruel. Even Tilly seems to share in his master's sorrow, letting out a soft whinny. Aziz apologizes for his emotional display, explaining that the retainers he lost were very precious to him, and tells Turan that the fallen knights and servants had practically raised him since he was a child. Hearing the genuine grief in his voice, Turan concludes that the young nobleman is a good person. He then confirms for a worried Aziz that he killed both of the Dark Elves, and that should be the last of them. But to be absolutely sure, he closes his eyes and activates a search spell. His magical senses expand outwards, sweeping through the surrounding forest for any other threats. After a thorough scan, he confirms that there are definitely no more Dark Elves in the vicinity. Aziz then asks about Turan's plans, and he replies that he, too, is on a pilgrimage. Puzzled by Turan's immense power and solitary travels, Aziz speculates that he must be the child of a great house. Turan humbly downplays his abilities, however, crediting his victory to a successful ambush and the crucial help from Tilly. To demonstrate, he lets his own mana flare, a calm, powerful blue aura surrounding him. In response, Aziz reveals his own mana, which erupts in a brilliant, fiery orange. Their contrasting auras create a stunning display of power across the crackling campfire. Turan is genuinely shocked by the incredible amount of mana Aziz possesses, realizing it surpasses his own even after he absorbed the elves' power. Aziz deduces that for Turan to be so effective with less raw mana, he must be noble-born from a powerful bloodline with plenty of room to grow. The question still lingers in his mind, however: why would someone with such potential be traveling all alone? Seeing an opportunity, he extends a formal invitation for Turan to accompany him to the estate of House Berg, and promises to repay Turan for saving his life, a proposal that our protagonist questions. Aziz proudly declares that his family, House Berg, are legendary enchanters who have crafted magic tools for generations. And he makes a grand promise: to craft for him the finest magic tool, one truly worthy of his power and heroism. Turan, Aziz, and his trusty steed Tilly continue their journey through the forest, heading towards the bird territory. Stopping at a makeshift grave, Aziz somberly wishes he could send the fallen from the Dark Elf attack back to their hometowns. He admits, however, that honoring his men properly will be difficult under the current circumstances. Turning to his companion, Aziz sincerely thanks him, not for saving his life, but for not mocking his display of emotion, and confides that he feels pathetic for crying over his subordinates, a weakness his father had warned him against. Recalling his father's harsh teachings, he explains that a true noble is meant to move forward without grieving, standing upon the sacrifices of others. He then reflects on this cold philosophy, thinking to himself that if not grieving for one's family is true strength, then it's something he could never achieve. At this, our guy offers a different perspective, reassuring Aziz that his grief isn't a sign of weakness, but rather one of kindness. Feeling a bond forming between them, Aziz suggests they drop the formal speech and talk more comfortably with each other. Then, with a bright smile, he extends his hand, officially offering his friendship. Having lived a life of isolation, Turan is momentarily taken aback by the very concept of having a friend. Still, he accepts the gesture, firmly shaking the young noble's hand and agreeing to their newfound friendship. After making their pact, Aziz suggests they take a break before continuing their journey. As they stop to rest, Turan's eyes are drawn to a wooden chest that Aziz brought with him. Aziz proudly reveals that the chest is a magical cold storage box, stocked with fresh food from the last city they visited. Turan is amazed by the convenience, learning that the magic tool can preserve food for up to a week. Continuing his demonstration, Aziz shows off other noble essentials: a pot that dispenses water, a disc that creates a shelter, and an orb that acts as a proximity alarm. And to top it all off, he shows that even his clothes are a magic tool, complete with a self-cleaning function. Turan is genuinely impressed, knowing that such a collection of magic tools is far from common. Aziz then promises to reward him with even greater things upon their return, vowing to repay the life debt he owes. He's so determined to repay his savior, in fact, that he vows if his family won't provide the rewards, he'll simply make the magic tools himself. Intrigued, Turan listens as Aziz brings up something far greater than any of the magic tools he has just shown. Aziz begins to marvel at the sheer diversity of Turan's magic, listing the incredible range of abilities he's witnessed on their short journey together. Overwhelmed by his companion's talent, he speculates that he must either possess a unique bloodline ability or have spent his entire life practicing magic. Turan, however, simply thinks to himself that he's just naturally gifted, opting not to reveal the true depth of his power. Remembering their agreement not to pry, Aziz quickly plays his question off as a joke, claiming no such all-powerful bloodline could possibly exist. Changing the subject, he asks about Turan's age, guessing he must be ancient despite his youthful appearance. However, he is left speechless when Turan reveals he's about to turn 18, a fact that makes his power level even more unbelievable. But the shock is mutual, as Turan learns that the boyish-looking noble is actually turning 43 this year. Aziz then states, "I should have known. When you had the magic power to take down 2 Wraith sorcerers, I wasn't expecting there to be 2 geniuses like you in the world." And reveals that this other genius is his cousin, who is around Turan's age and possesses an incredible bloodline. When Turan asks if this cousin could make him magic tools, Aziz clarifies that as a member of the main house, she is far above such tasks. He then begins to explain the significance of the main house to the bewildered Turan, and describes his cousin as the Princess of Arabian, a figure destined for greatness and a potential future head of a great house. He further elaborates on the politics of the great houses, explaining that succession isn't guaranteed, even for the head's direct children. With dozens of relatives in a single generation, the competition to become the next head is fierce and utterly ruthless. In fact, it's a common occurrence for a more talented relative to usurp the position from the direct heir. However, he explains that his cousin, Mesa, was born with the greatest talent among all the head's children. A true prodigy, she awakened her power and mastered all forms of combat magic in just a single decade. Now, at only 21, her power is already on par with the core members of the house, thanks to the full support she received. Turan astutely asks if the house performed a funeral, hinting at the dark tradition of absorbing a deceased member's mana. Aziz confirms with a smile that when their granduncle passed away, Mesa inherited the bulk of his immense magic power. Turan grimly understands that this brutal tradition of concentrating power is precisely how the great houses maintain their supremacy. Their conversation ends as Aziz points ahead, announcing they have almost reached their destination. Turan looks on in anticipation as they approach the heart of the Arabian territory. Soon, the dense forest gives way to the vast and sun-drenched Deccan plains, and Aziz proudly announces that they have arrived in the central territory of Arabian. Before them lies the magnificent castle and sprawling estate of House Berg, located in the city of Zavalin. Upon their arrival, a worried woman, the head of House Berg and Aziz's mother, rushes out to greet her returning son. Aziz joyfully embraces his mother, relieved to finally be home safe. Turan can only stare in disbelief, finding it hilarious that this man crying in his mother's arms is actually 43 years old. Just then, a stern, well-dressed man appears, chiding Aziz for his lack of dignity and reminding him to address his mother more formally. Aziz then formally introduces Turan to his parents, explaining that the mysterious traveler risked his own life to save him. His mother, concerned, asks what happened, so he recounts their harrowing encounter with the dark elf Wraith sorcerers. At this, she erupts in a fit of rage, swearing she will lead an army herself to annihilate the filthy wretches who dared to target her son. Her husband, Aziz's father, calmly intervenes, telling his wife to compose herself in front of their guest and staff. Turning his attention to Turan, the patriarch formally asks to which noble house he belongs. When Turan replies that he cannot say, the man's suspicion is clearly piqued. Turan honestly explains his humble origins, revealing he was born to a commoner mother and does not know his father. Aziz is stunned by this revelation, as Turan had never shared this part of his past with him. The head of House Berg accepts his explanation, addressing him as Turan of the Unknown House and promising a reward for saving her son. However, she refuses to host him in the main house, offering a room at an inn instead, an offer which Aziz vehemently protests. She then explains that they already have an important guest staying with them, making it too risky to bring in a stranger of unknown origin. Just then, a calm female voice cuts in, telling her aunt not to worry on her account, and she states that the person who saved her cousin would surely not try to assassinate her. And so, Mesa, the Princess of Arabian, makes her grand entrance, dressed in an elegant black gown. Aziz is surprised to see his cousin out of her room. Turan immediately recognizes her as the genius prodigy Aziz had described during their journey. Her pale, almost death-like complexion hints at the severity of the assassination attempt she recently survived. Turan's suspicions are confirmed as he learns she was nearly killed by assassins from House Zahar and is now hiding out at the Berg estate. Even Aziz can't believe an assassination attempt was successful within the heavily fortified main house. Mesa coolly confirms that there was an insider, noting that the main house is filled with people of questionable loyalty. Announcing that she's tired, Mesa bids everyone a good evening and prepares to retire for the night. With Mesa's implicit approval, the head of the house instructs her maid, Ina, to show Turan to the second-best guest room. After his long journey, Turan finds himself resting in a lavishly decorated room, a world away from his simple shepherd's life. Later, he explores the opulent hallways of the Berg estate, taking in his new, temporary surroundings. His quiet exploration is interrupted as Aziz calls out to him from down the hall, and greets his new friend, curious as to why he's wandering the hallway alone. Turan points to a glowing wall fixture, which Aziz explains is a magic lantern that he occasionally crafts. When he offers to give him one, Turan politely declines, explaining that his interest is purely in the mechanics, not the object itself. Suddenly, a powerful surge of magic flashes outside the windows, bathing the entire hallway in a brilliant golden light. Argyll looks up, completely unfazed, as he recognizes the distinct magical signature. At this, Aziz casually remarks that it's just his cousin Mesa, who is always diligently practicing her magic. As Turan watches the crackling energy, Aziz confirms that it's the legendary storm bloodline of the Arabian house. Gazing at the immense power on display, Aziz admits that while he's never hated his own bloodline, he's envious of his cousin's godlike potential. A glint appears in his eye as he wonders aloud just how strong the next leader of Arabian truly is, and asks Turan if he wants to take a look. Turan admits that he's also curious, yet feels it would be inappropriate for a suspicious outsider like himself to approach her. Aziz dismisses these concerns, confidently stating that he can vouch for his friend's character. Dropping the pretense, he reveals his true motive. He wants to see who is stronger between Turan and Mesa, a suspicion Turan had already figured out. With a wicked grin, he confesses that he's been holding a grudge against his perfect cousin for years. His ultimate goal is simple and petty. He just wants to see the unflappable Mesa frustrated for once in her life. With his plan set in motion, Aziz calls out to Mesa, who is training in the courtyard below. Mesa turns to see her cousin and the stranger, who introduces himself as Turan. Recognizing the name, she coolly asks what brings them to interrupt her practice. Aziz nonchalantly suggests they join her for magic practice, just like they used to do in the past. Mesa dryly recounts a childhood memory where he stormed off crying after she mastered a spell in 2 tries, a spell that had taken him an entire week. As Aziz seethes with embarrassment, Turan can't help but stifle a laugh. Trying to regain his composure, Aziz pivots, praising Turan's own incredible magical talent. He then springs his trap, suggesting that the two prodigies should test their skills against each other in a duel. She considers the proposal with a flicker of interest in her eyes. The duel is implicitly accepted, as Turan and Mesa now stand opposite each other in the silent courtyard. Without a word, Turan feels an immense wave of magical power begin to gather around his opponent. The clear sky instantly darkens as she summons a powerful storm with her bloodline ability. Wreathed in golden lightning, her eyes glow with raw, untamed power. The sheer pressure emanating from her is so intense that it seems to distort the very air around him. His eye widens, reflecting the overwhelming display of the storm bloodline's might. As the storm ends, beads of sweat form on Turan's brow, as the effort of simply withstanding her immense aura begins to take its toll. Breaking the silence, she looks at him and says she hates to say this, and confidently declares, "I don't believe you're a match for me." However, Aziz quickly steps in to mediate, conceding that Turan might not match Mesa in raw mana, but insisting his true strength lies elsewhere. Boasting about his new friend, he proclaims that Turan is a magic genius unlike any he has ever seen, surpassing even Mesa in raw talent. Her interest piqued by this high praise, she challenges Turan to prove his supposed greatness. Turan proposes the terms of their duel. They will each demonstrate a magic the other doesn't know, and the first to successfully replicate the spell wins. Aziz enthusiastically endorses the plan and eagerly asks Mesa for her agreement. She accepts the challenge, stating that she has heard Turan doesn't know his bloodline, so they both will use unique magic instead of their bloodline magic. Stepping forward with confidence, she announces that she will demonstrate her magic first. Turan and Aziz watch, waiting to see what the famed Princess of Arabian has in store. With a single stomp, she summons thick, glowing vines that erupt from the stone floor and ensnare an unsuspecting Aziz. Before he can react, he is completely bound by the powerful plant magic, yelling out in surprise. The vines then hoist the screaming young man upside down high into the air, much to his dismay. Looking coolly at Turan, Mesa challenges him to replicate her feat of plant creation and manipulation. Meanwhile, dangling helplessly, Aziz complains that he's getting dizzy. However, she cheekily tells her cousin to stay put for a moment, clearly enjoying his predicament. Turan, however, is completely unfazed by the display and calmly prepares to analyze and replicate the spell. He crouches down, focusing his attention on the ground where the magic originated. Recalling the principles he learned from the library spirit, Turan understands that magic manipulates existing phenomena rather than creating something from nothing. Placing his hand on the ground, he deduces that her magic merely accelerates the growth of seeds already present and commands them to grow. Because he realizes her magic isn't creation, but growth, as a seed begins to sprout under his influence. He then unleashes his own mana, and new vines burst forth from the ground with an aura of blue light. Mesa's eyes widen in utter shock, completely stunned that he replicated her magic instantly. Even Aziz, still hanging upside down, is speechless at the incredible learning speed on display. She questions if he has seen the magic before, but Turan confirms that this is his first time. Conceding the first round, she admits Aziz might have been right about Turan's talent, before unceremoniously dropping her cousin to the ground. Now it's Turan's turn, and Mesa confidently challenges him to cast a spell for her to copy. Our guy contemplates his next move, knowing that using his Zahar bloodline magic here would be a death sentence. Suddenly, an idea for a different, yet equally complex spell comes to mind. He turns his attention to a nearby bush, sensing a small creature within. The leaves rustle as the animal moves through the undergrowth. A moment later, a small rat scurries out from the bushes and onto the stone patio. Mesa looks on with disdain, assuming it to be simple animal manipulation magic. Turan calmly picks up the rat, explaining that the creature is merely the material for his real spell. His eyes then flare with blue energy as he channels a massive amount of mana into his hand. In an instant, he uses a horrifyingly complex spell to completely desiccate the rat, leaving a mummified husk in his hand. Mesa is left speechless, stunned by the gruesome and advanced magic he just displayed. Holding the dead rat by its tail, our protagonist calmly announces that he is done. Despite her shock, she calls his magic perfect, and coolly states that it's now her turn. She finds another rat on the ground for her attempt. The rat squeals as she snatches it from the ground. After that, she closes her eyes and begins to focus, gathering a golden aura around her hand. The rat in her hand begins to wither as she attempts to replicate the spell. But she struggles, realizing his magic was far more complicated than simple desiccation. Aziz asks how he could use such creepy magic, to which Turan casually replies that the idea just came to him. He muses to himself, surprised that even a prestigious house like Arabian is ignorant of the scientific principles behind magic. Noticing her struggle, Aziz begins to taunt his cousin, suggesting they just call it a win for Turan. Infuriated, Mesa snaps at him, refusing to admit defeat. She knows that causality, the understanding of a phenomenon, is a highly complex element of magic, and runs through the core principles in her head, the phenomenon itself, recognizing its cause, and having enough mana to produce it. While struggling, she acknowledges that perceiving the cause is crucial for both success and mana efficiency. Realizing she lacked the fundamental understanding of the spell, she decides on a brute force method instead. To compensate for her lack of knowledge, she begins pouring a massive quantity of mana into the spell. With a look of intense strain, she focuses all her will on one command, for the rat to rot while it's still alive. To everyone's surprise, her brute force method works and the rat withers in her grasp. Aziz can only stare in disbelief, shocked that she actually pulled it off. Panting and exhausted, she holds up the desiccated rat, proudly declaring her success. The victory is short-lived, however, as she immediately collapses, unconscious. A panicked Aziz rushes to his cousin's side, screaming her name. Turan finds her collapse strange, knowing that simple mana depletion shouldn't have caused her to lose consciousness, and realizes her condition is far worse than mere exhaustion. Something is fundamentally wrong with her. Looking closer, he notices the alarming thinness of her wrists and limbs. And then he has a sudden realization about the true cause of her collapse. Taking charge, he lifts the unconscious Mesa and orders a frantic Aziz to bring water and salt, and to call for the adults. As he carries her, he is shocked by how unnaturally light she feels, realizing she's suffering from severe malnutrition on top of mana depletion. Sometime later, Mesa groans as she begins to regain consciousness in her bed. Her aunt rushes to her side in a panic, asking if she's okay. Confused, Mesa asks where she is, and her aunt explains that she collapsed during a magic training session. She looks down sullenly as the memory of her duel and subsequent failure returns. Her aunt then asks if Turan was responsible, revealing that he is currently being held under observation. Mesa frantically defends him, insisting it was her own mistake and not his fault, before demanding that everyone leave. Concerned, her aunt brings her a bowl of soup, pleading with her to eat something despite the magical condition that makes it so difficult. With a deep, worried sigh, the head of House Berg leaves the room. Once her aunt has gone, Mesa sits alone in her room, quietly thanking her. She then stares at the untouched soup, her expression filled with dread. With a trembling hand, she reluctantly brings a spoonful to her lips. But the moment the food touches her tongue, a horrifying memory is triggered. She's haunted by flashbacks of her dying family, begging her for help as they waste it away. The psychological trauma causes a violent physical reaction, and she immediately throws up. Clutching her head in agony, she is overwhelmed by her past, unable to overcome her body's rejection of food. Meanwhile, Turan is led by a man named Haram to the impressive underground training chamber of House Berg. Haram explains that the chamber is incredibly fortified, with walls and doors as strong as trained muscles. Introducing himself, he warns Turan not to even think about escaping the secure room. However, Turan calmly assures him that he understands and had no intention of escaping anyway. Haram is momentarily thrown off when Turan agrees that the walls seem very firm. The stoic trainer is visibly flustered by this odd and literal response. Turan, misunderstanding the situation, wonders if Haram is simply boasting about the chamber's construction. His attention is immediately captured, as Haram begins to swing his sword before him. When our guy asks what Haram is doing, he simply replies, "Training." The man demonstrates his skill, moving with incredible speed and precision. Turan watches with admiration, recognizing the perfect efficiency in his movements as the mark of a truly trained body. Haram finishes his display and turns his intense gaze back toward Turan. Thinking he was being disruptive, Turan apologizes, but Haram tells him it's fine. Leaning in close, he then aggressively demands to know what Turan saw in his movements. Completely unfazed, Turan gives a simple, honest answer, "I thought it was cool." Haram is stunned into silence by the unexpectedly straightforward and earnest response, and explains that most nobles dismiss weapon arts, finding it easier to rely on ranged magic, but he scoffs that this is only because nobles have weak bodies and must rely on magical tricks instead of true strength. Turan agrees, acknowledging that for most bloodlines not specialized in strength, focusing on magic is simply more practical. However, he recalls his own recent battles, knowing from experience that close-quarters combat is sometimes unavoidable. Haram's expression changes as he offers Turan a practice sword. He holds out the weapon, telling him to take it and officially beginning his training. Turan is surprised, having assumed he was a prisoner, but Haram brushes off his suspicion and reveals the weapon is just a dull iron bar, stating that the wielder's body is the real sword, and Turan is currently too weak to hurt anyone with it. Grasping the iron bar, Turin acknowledges the hard truth in the man's assessment of his physical weakness. Haram looks on with intrigued approval, impressed that the young man isn't making excuses. Accepting the challenge, Turin channels his mana, ready to forge his weak body into a weapon worthy of his immense magical power. Haram immediately shouts at him, yelling, "That's not how this training works." Correcting his approach, he instructs him to forget about mana and focus solely on the physical aspects of wielding a sword. With hands-on instruction, the trainer adjusts Turin's improper stance, warning that his weak form will get him killed in a real fight. Our guy struggles under the weight and the sharp critique, but obediently follows the command to push past his perceived limits. After a grueling set, Haram offers a rare bit of praise for completing 10 repetitions and reminds him of the importance of proper breathing. Impressed by his potential, he compliments his fine vessel and encourages him to push his body to its absolute limit. He then explains his core belief that mana is a mere parlor trick compared to a physically trained body that can dominate a battlefield. Exhausted but resolute, Turin pants and vows to take his new master's harsh lesson to heart. Just then, his sharp senses pick up on an approaching figure, interrupting the intense training session. The head of House Berg arrives, walking toward him with a formal and somewhat somber demeanor. She bows deeply, offering Turin a sincere apology for her actions, calling it an unforgivable act toward their benefactor. However, Turin respectfully diffuses the situation, stating that he should be the one to apologize for his own inappropriate conduct. She then informs him that Mesa wishes to apologize to him personally and asks if he would have some time. Later, he approaches Mesa, and she formally apologizes for trapping him in the temple, though she clearly finds the whole situation troublesome. Turin waves off her apology, reassuring her that he's just glad she is safe and sound. But her curiosity gets the better of her, and she questions the animal rotting magic from their duel, accusing him of lying about its supposed efficiency. He explains that anyone could use it if they understood the principle, a response Mesa misinterprets as a refusal to teach her for free. But she cleverly points out that without revealing the method, he has no proof it isn't simply bloodline magic. At this, our guy replies that he doesn't particularly mind whether he wins or not. Frustrated at the potential blow to her reputation, Mesa exclaims that she can't let the matter end with her looking foolish. She then proposes a deal. She will teach him one of Arabian's secret arts in exchange for the secret of his magic, an offer he quickly accepts. Just then, the two prepare to exchange their magical knowledge. Mesa correctly deduces that his magic uses bioenhancement via microorganisms, a fact Turin confirms, and realizes with irritation that her own attempt was just inefficient brute force, cementing her loss in their duel. When Turin considers her success part of the wager, she objects, arguing that magic skill isn't measured by recklessly pouring out mana. Not wanting Aziz to know she lost, she asks Turin to tell him it was a draw, to which he readily agrees. Now indebted, Mesa considers how to properly compensate him for his lesson. She retrieves a simple comb, deciding it will be a suitable tool for her demonstration. She then prepares to demonstrate one of Arabian's profound secret arts using nothing but the comb. After running the comb through her hair, she holds it up, demonstrating how the objects now attract each other. He correctly identifies the secret art as simple static electricity. Mesa is utterly stunned that he already knew the principle behind her profound magic. Humbled, she admits she needs to find something he doesn't know in order to properly repay him. As a temporary solution, she suggests they train together, quickly adding that it's only to repay her debt. Turin smiles and accepts her offer, arranging to meet in the garden for training every evening. Later, he is treated to an incredibly lavish feast by the heads of House Berg. Aziz complains about the extravagant spread, joking that it looks like a meal fit for the Lord of Arabian himself. Turin senses this is more than just a welcome dinner, and suspects there's a purpose behind the family's generosity. The head of House Berg confirms his suspicion, bringing up the powerful magic tool her son promised as the price for his life. She then politely asks if he has anything specific in mind for the promised item. He requests a defensive tool capable of protecting him from surprise attacks, acknowledging the difficulty of protecting oneself with magic. After that, she states it will take time. Aziz's brother, Mello, steps in and offers to make it himself. He confidently declares he will craft the item, as he has free time after recently finishing her commission from the main house. Her mother asks for the details of his plan to create such a powerful defensive tool. Mello explains he will embed mana into jewelry to activate a guardian's defensive power, estimating the complex process will take 1 month. The head of the house proudly boasts that his son is already a highly skilled wizard, not far behind his own abilities, and emphasizes the magnitude of the gift, a custom tool made by a head wizard of an enchanter house over a month's time. When Turin suggests the gift is too excessive, she retorts that her son's life is worth far more. The family extends a formal invitation for him to stay as their guest for the next month, while Mello crafts the tool. Later, while strolling through the estate, Aziz remarks that his mother has taken quite a liking to Turan, and elaborates that she is impressed not only with Turan's incredible magical talent, but also with his relentless dedication to training. Turan astutely deduces that she is trying to recruit him into their family. Aziz cheekily confirms it, outlining his mother's typical recruitment strategy of using debt and temptation. Sensing Turan's unease, he reassures him that he won't be forced into anything, and that the tool is just a way to curry favor. He then asks about his evening plans, and Turan confirms he's scheduled to train with Mesa. With plenty of time before evening, Aziz insists Turan join him on a patrol to experience the city of Zavalin. Turan admits his original plan was simply to spend the entire day training magic in a corner. Declaring that life is too short, an enthusiastic Aziz drags his new friend out to see the city. The tour includes a visit to a lively gambling den, much to Turan's quiet curiosity. Aziz continues to show him the sights, from bustling taverns to local entertainment. As he points out the various stalls in the market, Turan's journey takes an unexpected turn. While walking through the market, he stops, his attention captured by a drawing posted on a wall. His eyes widen in shock as he recognizes the person in the heroic illustration. The poster is a dramatic, stylized portrait of his mentor and father figure, Kior. He fondly recalls the real Kior's more rugged and cheerful appearance, a stark contrast to the grim hero on the poster. Aziz leads him to a play depicting the legendary story of Kior, a warrior of Arabian from the year 219-5. On stage, an actor portraying Kior heroically strikes down an enemy in a dramatized battle. While Aziz applauds with great enthusiasm, Turan claps politely, amused by the performance. As Aziz asks if the play was worth watching, Turan confirms that it was very good, and reflects on Kior's own humble self-description as a merely ordinary knight, finding his modesty to be unmatched. So he decides that the next time he sees his mentor, he must ask if the fantastic stories about him are actually true. That night, he lies awake in bed, his mind racing with the revelations about Kior's past. The next morning, Turan is woken up by Haram, who is already sitting by his bed. A sleepy Turan questions his trainer's early morning visit. Haram replies he noticed yesterday that Turan's vessel is quite good, and declares it's toughening time, and orders him to follow, stating that a body is forged through tempering, not rest. Eager to improve, he agrees, knowing that training will be more beneficial than leisure. Just then, Aziz bursts in, excited to see a performance, only to freeze at the sight of his uncle. Seeing Haram with Turan, Aziz is visibly terrified of what's to come. Haram extends an invitation for Aziz to join their training and temper his own weak body. Panicked, Aziz makes a hasty retreat, claiming he still hasn't recovered from his day out. Turan watches his friend flee, completely bewildered by his terrified reaction. A moment later, a horrifying realization dawns on him about the intensity of the training that awaits. Under Haram's watchful eye, he is pushed to his physical limits with weighted push-ups and berates him for wanting to yield to the pain, shouting that his mind is being dominated by his body's weakness. Trembling with exhaustion, Turan struggles to complete the one last repetition demanded of him. Just as he reaches his breaking point, Haram calmly states, "That's enough for now." Turan collapses onto the floor, utterly spent from the grueling workout. Haram looms over him, asking if he's tired, to which he can only gasp in agreement. The trainer explains that as a wizard, this level of training is a one-time affair, a fortune not afforded to non-magic users. He then clarifies that an ordinary person's body weakens over time, requiring constant trials to maintain its peak condition. Wizards, however, benefit from mana maintaining their bodies, meaning once they are forged into steel, they don't weaken. With a menacing grin, he declares Turan's short rest is over and that he must be fully recovered. A look of pure panic crosses Turan's face as he realizes the training is about to resume. Haram proclaims that since he has rested enough, it's time to move on to weaponry and combat training. Turan's scream of agony echoes through the well-equipped training hall. Despite the pain, he reflects that his days spent training at Hausberg have been incredibly fulfilling. His daily routine consists of waking up early for brutal physical conditioning with Haram in a high-gravity training room. In the evenings, he practices advanced magic concepts with Mesa, such as creating lightning through finger friction. This grueling but productive routine continues, and 3 weeks pass by in a flash. During practice, one of his lightning bolts misses the target, crashing into the wall behind it. He looks at his sparking finger in frustration, annoyed that he missed the shot again. Mesa observes his training, noting that he's struggling more with this particular magic than she expected. At this, he explains with a wry smile that his difficulty stems from not being a native of Arabian like her. Mesa admits she can't offer much help. As for her, aiming lightning is instinctual. She just shoots and it hits. Just as he remarks that it's harder than it seems, their session is interrupted by a voice calling for Mesa. She turns with a look of annoyance to see who is calling for her. A messenger from the main house hurries towards them across the garden. When the man asks about Turan, she dismisses him, saying it's none of his business, and sharply reminds him that she had given orders not to be disturbed while she was recovering. Ignoring her complaint, the messenger announces that the Patriarch has summoned her. At this, she warns him that if the reason is trivial, he will be punished. He then delivers the urgent news: dark elves have been rampaging across the south. Both Turan and Mesa are stunned to learn that 3 cities have already fallen, prompting the assembly of an expeditionary force. An image of a terrifying horde of dark elves with glowing yellow eyes foreshadows the coming conflict. With a serious expression, Turan understands the gravity of the news. The enemy he faced before has now appeared in force. After dismissing the messenger, Mesa confirms she understands the summons and will return to the main house soon. With a sigh, she decides to investigate the dark elf situation herself. Before they part ways, she tells him she wants to repay him for teaching her creepy corruption magic. She then clasps her hands together as an idea comes to mind, and begins her lesson by asking him if he knows that electricity flows through the human body. Completely new to this concept, a shocked Turan asks if what she is saying is true. She condescendingly explains that it's a secret Arabian teaching, something a commoner like him would have no reason to know. To settle their debt, she offers to teach him the secret technique, and he readily accepts, knowing it will be a great help. Mesa explains the basics of bioelectricity, detailing how sensory input travels as electrical signals from the eyes and nose to the brain. She continues, explaining that the brain then processes these signals and sends electrical commands back throughout the body to initiate movement. Connecting her lesson to what he learned in the library, he realizes this is one of the fundamental laws of nature that House Arabian has mastered. Mesa explains that by accelerating this natural electricity with magic, one's perception and reaction speeds will also become faster. As he prepares to demonstrate the technique, she is impressed that he understood immediately, and curious to see how quickly he can learn it. Focusing his mana, he calls upon the minute electricities within him, and visualizes the pathways of electricity flowing through his entire nervous system. The goal, he explains, is to use mana to make the lightning transmitted through these pathways even faster. A powerful surge of blue electrical energy builds within his body. His eye glows with concentrated power, a bolt of lightning reflected within it. After demonstrating the technique, he waits for her reaction. With a smug look, he reveals that he has already mastered the technique, nonchalantly asking, "So, this is it?" However, the immense power proves too much for his untrained body, and he is hit with a severe backlash. He stumbles forward, clutching his head in agony from the magical overload. Mesa smugly notes his success, but adds that the pain is simply the consequence of recklessly using so much mana. However, she reassures him that the headaches will pass as he gets used to it, though he feels this invaluable lesson is more than he can ever repay. As she prepares to depart, she tells him to consider her teaching an investment in his talent, and jokingly warns him that once he learns even greater magic, she'll come to collect on everything he owes her. With a final look back, she flies off towards the main house. He watches her leave, reflecting on the powerful new magic he has just learned. The scene transitions to a hawk crying out over a bustling city. In Morgan City, a massive crowd has gathered for a deployment ceremony. Citizens cheer wildly, chanting "Glory to Arabian," as the expedition force prepares for war. Watching them, Turan remarks to Aziz that the ceremony looks more like a triumphal procession. Suddenly, Aziz's face lights up as he spots someone in the procession below. Forgetting his noble decorum, he excitedly shouts out to his cousin Mesa as she rides by on her horse. His father quickly grabs him, reminding him to maintain his dignity, but it's too late. Just then, an announcer's voice booms over the square, heralding the entrance of the head of House Arabian. A line of stern-faced guards parts the crowd, making way for their leader. Turan's gaze sharpens, curious to finally see the leader of such a powerful house. Through the crowd walks a heavily scarred and imposing man, the current head of House Arabian. It is the legendary Patriarch, Badal Arabian. Noticing the Patriarch's pale complexion, Turan asks Aziz if he is in ill health. Aziz mentions old rumors that Badal suffered grave injuries in a fight with the head of House Zahar, but he simply dismisses it as old age. Badal raises a hand to the sky, commanding the attention of the entire city. The crowd falls silent, watching their leader in rapt attention. A citizen looks up with tears of awe and reverence in his eyes. Badal addresses his people, telling them to trust in his strength and advance forward without fear. His eyes glow with immense power as he declares, "This is the strength of Arabian." He then unleashes a massive wave of golden energy, empowering every soldier and citizen in the square. The crowd roars as they are bathed in the Patriarch's overwhelming magic. Filled with newfound strength and morale, the people chant for the glory of Arabian and the protection of their Thunderlord. Turan is left in awe, witnessing the true strength of Arabian as Badal summons a massive thunderstorm overhead. He realizes that even with a weakened body, the man stands at the absolute pinnacle of magic. Turan watches the storm rage, a power so great it could overturn the earth. Inspired by the incredible display, he vows to himself that one day, he too will attain that level of power. Later, before his departure from the Berg estate, Mello presents Turan with a parting gift, a powerful defensive bracelet, and explains that the magical tool increases physical durability and, when infused with mana, can reach the level of a guardian bloodline noble. However, he cautions him that the bracelet's mana consumption is severe, so he shouldn't rely on it for long. Turan gratefully accepts the gift, acknowledging it as a rare treasure even among the great houses. As he prepares to leave, the head of House Berg makes one last appeal, and formally invites him to join House Berg, seeing his immense potential, but he politely declines the generous offer, explaining that his path lies elsewhere. She accepts his decision, admitting that Aziz had already told her that Turan was not one to stay in a single place. After that, he gives his solemn promise that he will never forget their kindness and will consider the Berg family his friends forever. With his goodbyes said, Turan finally walks out of the Berg estate. However, he stops as he senses two people waiting for him. His teacher, Haram, and his friend Aziz stand in his path for a final farewell. Haram offers him a parting gift of his own, a sheathed magic knife, and explains that while it has no extraordinary functions, it's a durable and sharp blade. Turan accepts the knife, deeply moved. He then sincerely looks at Haram and thanks him, respectfully calling him teacher. For the first time, the stoic man cracks a slight, proud smile. Without another word, he turns and walks away, his duty done. Next, Aziz playfully throws a large, self-repairing cloak over Turan's shoulders. Turan is confused at first, but Aziz reminds him that he once envied his noble clothing. He happily hands over a matching shirt and pants, explaining they don't get soiled easily and even mend themselves. Turan smiles, touched by his friend's thoughtfulness. Aziz tells him he's a good friend and that their time together has given him a new perspective on life. When Aziz asks about his next destination, Turan simply states he'll be heading east for now. Aziz shudders at the memory of his own trip to Carmine and warns him to avoid taking a ship due to the treacherous waves. Turan knows that beyond those waves lies Zahar's territory, the Enril Desert, but decides to keep his true destination a secret for now. With a final friendly warning to come back safely, Aziz sends him on his way. He accepts, turning his back on the Grand Berg estate and stepping out into the wider world. Now properly equipped, he begins his long journey east. As he walks, he reflects on being all alone once again. Deciding to test his new abilities, he plants his feet firmly on the ground. He then activates the bioelectricity magic Mesa taught him, bursting forward with incredible speed. A fellow traveler gawks in disbelief as he blurs past. The travelers are left in the dust, stunned by the impossible speed they just witnessed. He comes to a stop far down the road, panting but exhilarated by his new power. His journey takes him into a dense forest at the foot of a large mountain. While walking through the woods, he suddenly stops, his senses on high alert. He picks up the scent of a campfire, but it quickly turns into the repulsive smell of burning flesh. His eyes widen as he realizes something is terribly wrong. Following the smell, he arrives at a small village that has been completely destroyed. He is horrified to find the charred and mutilated bodies of villagers impaled on wooden stakes. Standing amidst the carnage, he wonders if this was the work of bandits because he reasons that the Dark Elf invasion shouldn't have reached this far north yet. Then, amidst the silence of death, he senses a faint sign of life nearby. He traces the sign to a dilapidated building and discovers the presence is coming from a cellar hidden beneath the floorboards. Turan firmly grips the handles of the heavy cellar door. With a heave, he throws the wooden door aside, revealing the darkness below. Hiding inside is a small, terrified girl, the village's sole survivor. Mistaking him for one of her attackers, she lets out a piercing scream. At this, he holds up his hands peacefully, trying to calm her and assure her that he is there to help. With tears welling in her eyes, she looks up with a sliver of hope, asking if he is telling the truth. Confirming that he is, he gently asks what happened to her village. The girl tearfully explains that everyone was killed by a single wizard, a revelation that shocks him. The overwhelming exhaustion and fear finally cause the young girl to collapse. Turan catches her, relieved to find that she is not critically injured, merely exhausted. Cradling the unconscious girl, he resolves to get her to safety before investigating further. But as he turns to leave, a mysterious archer draws a glowing crystalline ice bow. Turan is caught completely off guard as the hidden assailant declares, "Found you." The blonde woman takes aim, with a flaming arrow pointed directly at him. and commands him to kneel. While holding the innocent survivor in his arms, he is wrongly accused of being a murderer. Mistaking the scene entirely, she accuses him of escalating from murder to kidnapping a child. Then, a hot-headed fire mage named Gil nervously threatens him with a flaming sword, warning him not to so much as twitch. Turan, however, remains unfazed by the threats and attempts to de-escalate, insisting it's all a misunderstanding. But ignoring his leader's caution, the panicked Gil unleashes a powerful fire attack directly at Turan and the child. A fiery blast engulfs the very spot where he was standing. Bison immediately berates Gil for his reckless attack, shouting that he could have harmed the child. But as the smoke clears, her eyes widen in utter disbelief. Turan stands completely unscathed, a swirling blue barrier having effortlessly deflected the attack. Showcasing the magic tool from House Berg, he remarks that he didn't expect to use his new gifts so soon. Bison's party is left speechless, wondering how he blocked the magic with his body and emerged without a single scratch. She stares intently, trying to comprehend the nature of his powerful defensive magic. Turan reiterates that it's a misunderstanding but firmly warns the group that he will retaliate if they attack again. Hesitantly, Bison lowers her bow, though her suspicion clearly remains. Just then, the commotion awakens the young girl in his arms, who begins to stir. One of Bison's vassals plants a seed of doubt, pointing out how odd it is for a mass murderer to spare a single child. Finally, she introduces herself as Bison and asks for his name, but remains skeptical, questioning how they can trust Turan based only on circumstantial evidence. Turan confidently suggests they simply ask the child once she's fully awake, since she was a direct witness. Bison is shocked to learn that the girl has seen the true culprit, a notorious killer known as the Burners. When she questions him about this mysterious figure, Turan admits he's never heard of the Burners. Bison explains that the Burner is a deranged wizard who has been terrorizing the region for months, burning villagers to death. Because there were no survivors from his previous attacks, very little is known about the killer's identity. All they know is the terrifying moniker the victims scream in their final moments. Just then, the now-conscious survivor provides a clear description of the killer, a rough-looking man with a red cloak and facial hair. The girl's testimony completely exonerates Turan in their eyes. Bison looks at Turan, the weight of her group's grave misjudgment dawning on her. Therefore, she and her vassals bow their heads, offering a sincere apology for their rash and hostile actions. Remembering his past encounter with the hunter Medon, he understands how eagerness can sometimes lead even good people astray. He graciously accepts their apology, acknowledging their concern for the child's safety before asking about their hunt for the Burner. Bison admits they had mistakenly targeted him simply because he was near the crime scene. But with the new description, she is confident they can catch the killer thanks to their tracker, Asha. The mention of a pursuer piques Turan's interest, and he asks if they are from House Zahar. Bison quickly clarifies that she is from House Carmen and that her companions are vassals of her house. She then explains that Asha is descended from a line with mixed Zahar blood, which gives her a weaker but still effective form of search magic. Now that the misunderstanding is cleared, she gestures toward the ruined village and makes a formal request, and humbly asks if he would lend his strength to help them hunt down the Burner. To entice him, she offers him the entire bounty and her share of the mana, explaining that she needs to build her reputation. Turan inquires about their target's strength, and Bison confirms that the Burner is a powerful noble-level wizard. She elaborates that he has already slain multiple knights, proving he is a formidable threat. Turan realizes this is the perfect opportunity he's been looking for, since a strong opponent is necessary for his own growth. She beams with joy as he formally agrees to join their hunt. First, however, the party finds a safe home for the young survivor in a nearby village. Turan ensures the child will be well cared for by providing her new guardians with a heavy pouch of gold. With a promise to return in a few years to check on her, he bids the young girl farewell. The girl's new foster father is left stunned by the sheer generosity of the payment. Having secured the child's safety, Turan and the hunters return to the scorched village to begin their search. Asha, the party's tracker, activates her search magic, her eyes glowing with focus. The group follows her into the woods as she begins to track the killer's trail. With her senses now honed on a specific target, she confidently points the party in the right direction. Their path takes them off the main road and deep into the untamed forest. She uses her heightened sense of smell to pick up the faint scent of ash left in the killer's wake. As she meticulously follows the trail, Turan asks what clues she's currently tracking. Asha explains her process. She followed the culprit's footprints until she could detect the faint smell of ash clinging to his path. Turan is impressed by her professionalism, noting what a difference a clear description has made. Suddenly, her eyes lock onto the trail ahead as she confidently announces that she's found him. Without hesitation, she dashes forward, forcing Bison to call after her to slow down. The trail leads the party to the mouth of a dark, ominous-looking cave. Taking command, Bison instructs Turan to join her at the front as they prepare to enter. With she illuminating the path with a magical orb, the group cautiously ventures into the darkness. As they move deeper, she senses a presence and asks Asha if someone is inside. Looking terrified, Asha confirms with certainty that there is indeed one person in the chamber ahead. They proceed into the main cavern, ready for a confrontation. Bison's expression hardens as they approach their target's lair. The cavern is dimly lit by a few scattered torches, revealing a lone figure in the shadows. They've found him. The cloaked man known as the Burner stands waiting. The man turns, a deeply unsettling smile on his scarred face, and welcomes his dear guests. When he asks, "Is that person the Burner?" Asha confirms his identity, stating she can smell the ash on him. Bison draws her bow and confronts the man, accusing him of being the village-burning murderer. The Burner merely smirks with feigned confusion, claiming he doesn't understand the accusation. Then, without another word, he unleashes a massive explosion of fire, attempting to incinerate the entire party. Caught off guard by the sudden and powerful attack, the others cry out in alarm. But Turan reacts instantly, activating the defensive bracelet gifted to him by Mello. A powerful magical shield envelops both him and Bison, completely negating the fiery blast. The Burner stares in shock, unable to believe his strongest attack was blocked so easily. Seizing the opening, Bison fires a magically charged ice arrow straight at the stunned wizard. The arrow finds its mark, piercing deeply into his leg. The impact slams the killer to the ground, seemingly ending the fight in a single blow. However, the wounded Burner defiantly slams his hand onto the stone floor. Suddenly, a gigantic stone hand erupts from the ground, threatening to crush them. Turan is taken aback, surprised that a supposed pyromancer can also manipulate earth. Using his enhanced agility, he narrowly dodges the crushing stone attack, and he immediately blitzes towards the downed Burner, closing the distance in a flash. The killer desperately reaches out to cast another spell, but it's too late. Turan lands a clean, decisive blow with a stone enhanced by magic, cutting his opponent's hand. The sheer force of the strike sends the Burner careening across the cavern. Before the man can recover, Turan gathers bioelectricity in his hand. He then unleashes a powerful electric shock, paralyzing the Burner and neutralizing him completely. The murderer convulses in agony as Turan's attack incapacitates his nervous system. Turan calmly stands over the defeated and twitching form of the Burner. Bison catches her breath and confirms their victory, as he tells her to tend to the others while he handles the prisoner. Just then, he drops some seeds, and he uses his magic to securely bind the unconscious murderer with plant roots. With the killer's arms and legs sealed, he prepares his blade for interrogation. He roughly wakes the captured fanatic and demands answers. The Burner, though bound and defeated, manages a weak, defiant chuckle. Pressing a knife to the man's throat, Turan warns him that any attempt to use mana will result in his immediate death. The party gathers around, demanding to know who he is and why he's committing these atrocities. But the Burner remains stubbornly silent. Losing his patience, Turan stabs the man in the leg to compel him to speak, and demands to know why a wandering noble is murdering innocent villagers, making it clear he will show no mercy. The Burner finally breaks, fanatically screaming that he was following God's command to burn the sinners. Bison's party can only stare in disbelief at the man's crazed religious justifications. He continues to rave, claiming that God taught him a secret method to acquire a bloodline. The killer delusionally proclaims that by burning just a few more people, he will finally awaken the pyromaniac bloodline. The hunters dismiss him as completely insane, believing it's impossible to obtain an inborn power through such a method. But while the others see only madness, Turan listens intently, a disturbing idea beginning to connect in his mind. He suddenly recalls the hunter Maidan's claim that ordinary people could gain power by killing monsters. Maidan's passionate insistence that he had witnessed this supposedly impossible feat now echoes with a new, terrifying meaning. As the Burner continues his rant, Turan realizes his words may not be the ravings of a madman after all. A shocking and terrible possibility dawns on him, and he looks down in contemplation as the pieces of a horrifying puzzle fall into place. Because of that, he comes to a chilling conclusion: he may have just uncovered a fundamental, dark secret of how his world truly works. Without hesitation, Turan executes the bound serial killer known as the Burner. As he sheathes his blade, Bison and her companions can only stand and watch the brutal aftermath. The young fire mage, Gil, feels a wave of nausea after witnessing the cold-blooded killing. He voices his discomfort, comparing the execution of a helpless man to the mere slaughter of livestock. But Bison sternly rebukes him for his naive sympathy, reminding him that the burner would have killed them all without a second thought. She argues that considering the sheer number of people the man murdered, even a far more painful death would not have been enough. After the ordeal, Turan sits alone, carefully examining the burner's confiscated journal. Inside, he finds a map detailing all the villages the killer destroyed, providing more than enough evidence of his crimes. However, as he flips through the pages, his eyes widen in surprise at an unexpected discovery. He's shocked to find complex magical combination formulas, making him wonder if the killer's insane claims about a god held some truth after all. Just then, Bison approaches him, ready to discuss their next steps now that the killer has been dealt with. With the threat eliminated, the group absorbs the mana from the burner's corpse. A swirl of potent green energy flows from the body, empowering Turan and the hunters. Later, an official from House Carmine formally congratulates Bison for capturing the infamous serial killer, hailing her as a new rising star. She modestly deflects the high praise, giving credit to her team. Having received their reward and recognition, Turan and Bison stand together, their temporary alliance now concluded. When asked about her future plans, she explains that her group will continue to travel while hunting monsters. She then hands him a bag of money, his share of the reward as payment for his assistance. And our guy announces that he's parting ways with them to head straight for the port city of Abacha. Before they part, Bison whispers to him and he agrees to keep quiet about the burner's world-shattering claim that one can acquire a bloodline through murder. With their business concluded, Bison, Asha, and Gil wave a friendly goodbye to their temporary companion. Turan weighs back, but internally reminds himself that while the burner's theory is dangerous, there's no definitive proof, yet. His journey continues alone as he treks across a vast and desolate desert. As he walks, he senses a distinct change in the atmosphere, noting that the air is becoming more humid. He tests his pyromancy and confirms his suspicion. The humidity has weakened its firepower and increased its mana cost. On the other hand, the change in climate has a positive effect on a different type of magic. He discovers that it has become significantly easier to conjure and manipulate water. This dramatic shift in elemental affinities can only mean one thing: he is finally approaching the coast. Turan walks resolutely towards the sun-drenched horizon, knowing his next destination is within reach. At last he arrives, cresting a dune to behold the sprawling port city of Abacha nestled by the sea. Wasting no time, he makes his way through the city's streets, seeking passage for the next leg of his journey. In a local tavern, he overhears sailors loudly discussing their plans to set sail the next day. They complain bitterly about their dangerous route to the Enreal Desert, which is plagued by constant harpoon attacks from merfolk. Adding to their woes, others chime in about the ever-present threat of pirates on the very same route. Their captain, a man named Boros, laments that he's on the verge of paying funeral expenses instead of wages, and is desperate to hire a skilled knight. Seeing his chance, Turan approaches the captain's table, inquiring if their ship is indeed heading to the Enreal Desert. Captain Boros dismisses him gruffly, saying he doesn't have room and that he'd sooner take a barrel of booze than an extra passenger. In a quiet display of power, Turan places his hand over the captain's mug of ale. Boros looks up, annoyed and ready to tell the stranger off. But he's rendered speechless as Turan's magic instantly freezes the drink into a solid block of jagged ice. The captain can only stare in disbelief at the frozen mug on his table. The entire tavern stands in awe. Now intrigued, the captain asks what brings a powerful knight to a place like this, and Turan repeats his desire to board a ship to the Enreal Desert. And he makes his offer clear: he will serve as the ship's guard against pirates and merfolk in exchange for passage. Boros is hesitant, explaining that his ship is poor and he can't afford a salary, let alone provide a room befitting a knight's status. Unfazed, Turan insists that he doesn't care about pay or conditions. His sole objective is to reach the Enreal Desert. Stunned by his incredible good fortune, Captain Boros eagerly asks if he's serious. With a wide, almost greedy grin, the captain declares the deal settled and immediately welcomes him to the crew. With their new guard hired, the ship departs from the port of Abacha and sets sail for the open sea. Meanwhile, in a different part of the world, a fortress burns under a relentless assault from monstrous dark elf-like creatures. In the midst of the chaos, a lone soldier of the Arabian forces fights desperately for his life. He stares down a grotesque, muscle-bound beast, one of many in the overwhelming enemy force. The soldier skillfully evades a massive swing and counters, slicing through one of his attackers. He continues his fight against overwhelming enemies. Despite his bravery, he is quickly being overwhelmed by the sheer number of assailants. Completely surrounded, he finds himself hopelessly outmatched by the vicious horde. Realizing his death is imminent, he braces for the final blow. But suddenly, a massive bolt of lightning descends from the heavens, vaporizing the monsters around him. The soldier looks up from the smoldering remains, shocked by his miraculous rescue. Mesa, the Princess of Arabian, descends gracefully from the sky, her powerful magic turning the tide of the battle. As the grateful soldier stammers his thanks, she coolly commands him to rejoin his unit. The soldier scurries to safety while she prepares to re-engage the enemy. Suddenly, her uncle, Kadram Arabian, appears by her side, calling out her name. As the vice captain of the subjugation force, he immediately checks to see if she's been hurt in the fighting. Mesa assures him she is fine, but he chides her for being reckless, reminding her that her life is far more valuable than those of ordinary knights. However, she dismisses his concerns and quickly changes the subject, asking for a report on the battle's progress. Kadram informs her that they are successfully reclaiming the area, though they still haven't located the enemy's hidden tunnels. With cold determination, she tells him to inform her as soon as the tunnels are found, as she intends to deal with them personally. Ignoring her uncle's authority, she flies back into the heart of the battle, leaving him behind. At this, he mutters angrily about her insolence, blaming his brother for raising her to be so reckless. Watching her fight, he fears that her rash behavior will lead her to the same tragic fate as her mother and younger brother. Meanwhile, far away on the open sea, Turan's ship sails peacefully towards its destination. He stands alone at the ship's railing, gazing out at the vast, endless ocean. He then broods over the difficulty of his quest, admitting to himself that he has no idea how he'll find any clues about his Zahar lineage once he arrives. Unaware of his father's status, he knows that simply barging into Zahar territory could be incredibly dangerous. He laments that his only leads are a few heirlooms and a crude, childlike drawing of his mother, and wonders how long his search will take with so little to go on. Suddenly, Captain Boros cheerfully claps a hand on his shoulder, pulling him from his thoughts and asking what's on his mind. Turan plays it off, smiling and claiming he was just marveling at the vastness of the ocean. The captain asks if he's handling seasickness well, remarking that most landfolk get ill just from the sight of endless water. He then also mentions that the boatswain is thrilled to be teaching a noble knight the ins and outs of sailing, from tying ropes to handling sails. Turan explains that he finds the knowledge genuinely interesting and believes it will be useful to him in the future. A sailor's shout cuts through their conversation, announcing that it's finally mealtime for the crew. Captain Boros enthusiastically rallies his men, telling them to eat up before getting back to work. During the meal, the boatswain explains to Turan that the bland-tasting pickled cabbage is essential, as it prevents the crew from dying of gum disease. Intrigued, Turan asks what gum disease is. The boatswain elaborates that it's a fatal illness where one's gums bleed, which they learn can be cured by eating sour foods. Turan finds this fascinating and asks how they discovered the cure, but the boatswain simply says the knowledge was passed down among sailors over time. The old sailor then shares a grim rumor. Before they discovered the cabbage cure, some used to eat merfolk raw to ward off the disease. Their conversation is abruptly interrupted by a shout from the lookout, who has spotted a ship on the horizon. Panic sets in as the crew questions if it's pirates, while the lookout in the crow's nest desperately tries to identify the vessel. Through his spyglass, he confirms their fears. The approaching ship is not flying the crest of any noble house. The boatswain sighs with resignation, commenting that the day was going too smoothly and he has a bad feeling that they're pirates. At the captain's command, the crew rushes to arm themselves, preparing for the inevitable battle. The boatswain quickly assesses the situation, noting that the enemy ship is faster and that attempting to outrun them is futile, and realizes their only hope of escape is to reach a nearby island before they're caught. Putting his trust in their new guard, the captain turns to Turan and asks if he'll be all right. Turan smirks confidently, reassuring him that as long as there are no knights or nobles aboard the enemy ship, it will be no problem at all. Filled with new confidence, Captain Boros gives the rousing order to turn the ship and engage, spurred on by the crew's cheer of "Long live the knight." The ship skillfully maneuvers through the waves, turning to face the approaching pirate vessel head-on. The pirates jeer from their deck, laughing as they offer to spare their lives if they stop the ship and surrender. When our guy asks if they should surrender, the boatswain grimly clarifies that a pirate's idea of mercy is cutting off their captive's legs before throwing them overboard. Having heard enough, Turan mutters, "Just as I thought," and takes a firm step forward. Then, in a breathtaking move, he leaps high into the air, easily clearing the gap between the two moving ships. He lands single-handedly on the enemy deck amidst the stunned pirates, immediately felling the closest one with his blade. The pirates are shocked by the one-man boarding party, yelling in confusion and demanding to know who he is. As their leader screams at them to attack, Turan unleashes his magic, summoning dozens of deadly ice shards from the moisture in the air. The crystalline projectiles rain down on the pirates, impaling them and turning the deck into a scene of bloody carnage. He then looks upon the chaos he has created with a cold, almost cruel, smile. With blue energy crackling around his hand, he decides that against these kinds of people, there's absolutely no need to hold back. The deck is already littered with bodies, yet Turan stands ready for the next wave. One of the pirates rallies his terrified comrades, shouting that it's a matter of kill or be killed. Driven by desperation, the remaining pirates charge forward in a final, futile assault. Turin's eyes glow with frigid power as he prepares to meet their charge. He effortlessly conjures an ice blade, ready to carve a path through his enemies. With his newly formed blade, he easily cuts them, demonstrating his superior skill. Ignoring the carnage, a pirate captain yells for his men to keep attacking without letting up. Turan's ice sword clashes against steel blades, blocking another pirate's attack. Like a dancer in a storm of blades, he expertly dodges and defends against multiple assailants. In a brutal display of efficiency, he skewers two pirates with a single, fluid motion. His focus is absolute as he analyzes the movements of every remaining enemy. With the precision swing of his ice sword, he cuts down another enemy. The fight continues as the pirates charge at him. His movements are a blur of white hair and black cloth as he continues his slaughter. He spins through the crowd, his ice magic cutting down anyone who gets too close. Another pirate falls, his back pierced by two lethally placed ice shards. Suddenly, a pirate manages to grapple him from behind, screaming, "Die!" as he goes for a fatal stab. The blade impacts Turan's back, but the expected killing blow never comes. Seeing an opportunity, two more pirates rush in to stab him while he's seemingly defenseless. The pirate's eyes widen in sheer disbelief at what happens next. However, Turan remains unfazed as the sword stops just near his neck. The attackers realize in horror that their blades cannot pierce his skin, thanks to his magic-infused cloak. He retaliates instantly, impaling every one of them with razor-sharp shards of ice. Blood sprays as their lives are extinguished. With a wild grin, Turan launches himself back into the fray to finish the job. The last of the pirate crew are dismembered in a final, gory display of his power. The screams of the dying echo across the ship as the battle reaches its bloody conclusion. Silence finally falls as Turan stands victorious over the last of the slaughtered pirates. From above, the sheer scale of the massacre is clear, with dozens of bodies covering the deck. The captain and his crew connect the two ships. As the captain approaches him, he laughs in disbelief, exclaiming that Turan single-handedly wiped them all out, and jokingly asks if he works as a professional cleaner, given how thoroughly he dealt with the pirates. The rest of Boros' crew erupts in cheers, hailing Turan as their heroic knight. One of the sailors, concerned by the blood, asks if Turan needs to see a physician. Spattered in gore but completely unharmed, Turan casually reassures the man he's fine and clarifies with a chilling calmness that all the blood belongs to the pirates. After taking control of the captured vessel, Captain Boros reports that he searched the ship thoroughly and explains that the pirate ship was actually a merchant vessel that went missing years ago, but he scoffs that it's just like those low-life pirates to steal and repaint a ship for their own use. Since Turan won the battle by himself, the captain declares that ownership of the captured ship belongs entirely to him. A stunned Turan is congratulated on unexpectedly becoming a new ship owner. Unsure how to proceed, he asks the more experienced captain for advice on his newfound asset. Boros explains the tedious and unprofitable option of returning the ship to its original owners. Then, he suggests a much better alternative: sell the ship at the Northern Sea Islands, where the demand is high. However, he notes the logistical challenge, as moving the second ship will require his own crewmen. Turan readily agrees that if he uses Boros' men, they should be compensated for their labor. As his crew disposes of the pirate corpses, the captain suggests a 10% service fee for his men's help. Turan counters with a more generous offer, asking Boros to handle the entire sale for a 20% commission. Holding up two fingers, he solidifies his 20% offer, eager to delegate the responsibility. Delighted by the deal, Boros accepts, promising his connections will ensure they get a very good price. Their business discussion is suddenly interrupted by a crewman bursting in, shouting about a mermaid. Startled, Boros jumps to his feet, initially thinking they are now being attacked by mermaids. The crewman clarifies that they found one the pirates were holding captive under the deck. Now intrigued, Turan sits back as he and Boros learn about the unexpected discovery. On the deck of the captured ship, Boros' crew begins the grim task of mopping up the blood. The captain asks aloud about the important guest. At this, the boatswain replies that he hasn't gone in yet either, he only just recovered the report. The captain invites Turan to see the important guest, and he readily agrees. As they descend, Boros explains that only pretty female mermaids fetch a high price, and elaborates that rich, bored lords on the mainland go crazy for exotic and mysterious things. A crewman leads them to a small cabin in the ship's hold where the captive is being kept. Turan's expression is neutral as he prepares to see the captive mermaid for the first time. Inside, they find a small, humanoid creature with blue skin and webbed feet, tightly bound with rope. The captive mermaid glares up at them with a look of sullen defiance. Boros sighs, pointing out the unfortunate fact that the mermaid is a male, so he laments that since rich lords have no interest in male mermaids, this one will sell for a pittance. Enraged at the dismissal, the captive shouts that he is Armani, the 47th prince of North Estadale, and demands respect. Turan and Boros are skeptical, figuring the mermaid is just bluffing and claiming to be royalty to save his life. Testing the claim, Boros mockingly asks the prince if he can perform the legendary royal feat of transforming into a fish. Armani claims he cannot transform because he is restrained and out of the water. Our guy immediately dismisses this as a transparent trick to try and escape. Changing tactics, he asks if mermaids eat humans, a rumor Boros confirms is true. Just then, Turan coldly declares that since the mermaid eats humans and has no monetary value, he will simply kill him. Boros weighs the slim chance of a jackpot against the high probability of being tricked. Fearing Armani will just escape if released, the captain sees no reason to risk looking like a fool. As Turan's hand glows with deadly energy, he moves to execute the captive prince. Terrified, Prince Armani screams for him to stop, questioning how he dares to threaten royalty. Turan's hand, wrapped in glowing blue magic, hovers menacingly over the prince. In a desperate plea, Armani swears he has never eaten a human in his life. Turan's cold, shadowed gaze remains fixed on the terrified prince. Knowing his life is on the line, Armani grits his teeth and prepares to make a final offer. As a last resort, he bargains for his life, promising to give them a great treasure if they spare him. Seeing he has their attention, a hopeful Armani eagerly confirms he can lead them to the treasure, and grandly proclaims it to be artifacts left behind by the Freyon gods whom humans worship. An image of divine beings and powerful magical items flashes through their minds. Sometime later, the ships arrive at a port town as the sun begins to set. The twin vessels dock at the bustling harbor, a safe haven after their violent journey. Boros's crew disembarks, cheering at the prospect of solid land and a well-deserved drink. On the deck, Boros asks Turan if he has come to a decision about the mermaid's offer. Turan confirms he will investigate the treasure claim tonight, as Armani claims it's not far. He sets off from the port in a small rowboat with Prince Armani as his guide. Armani indignantly questions the need for chains, insisting a prince always keeps his promises. Nervously, he asks for reassurance that Turan will really free him if the treasure is real. Turan simply replies, yes, before infusing the ore with magic to speed their journey. As the boat zips across the water, Armani warns Turan not to be disappointed, calling it treasure only by land dweller standards. Under the full moon, Turan impatiently tells the prince to stop talking and just lead the way. The small boat ventures far out into the dark, moonlit sea. Following Armani's directions, Turan dives deep and begins to walk along the ocean floor. However, he moves effortlessly through the crushing depths, protected by his magic. As he gets closer to the location, his eyes widen in surprise at the sight before him. The promised treasure is revealed to be the colossal, petrified remains of an ancient sea serpent. Turan stands in awe before the gargantuan stone skeleton, a relic of a bygone age. Under the light of the full moon, the pair makes their way across the open ocean toward the promised treasure. Suddenly, Turan's eyes widen in surprise as he spots their destination. As they approach a remote, craggy island, Armani confirms it is the correct location. Stepping ashore, Turan prepares to verify the merman's claim before they venture any further. He gathers a handful of seawater and casts a search spell to scan the surrounding area. The spell radiates outwards, targeting any nearby merfolk, but reveals only the local marine life. Relieved, he notes to himself that at least Armani didn't lead him into a merfolk stronghold. Having confirmed the area is safe, they beach their rowboat and head inland. Turan leads the still-chained Armani through the woods, while the nervous prince insists he remembers the way. Suddenly, Armani stops and shouts that he has found the spot. Turan looks on as his guide confirms, it's here. The treasure's location is a tranquil lake, nestled deep within the island's forest. At the water's edge, Turan asks how deep it is, and Armani casually states it's about 300 meters. Turan gives the tiny merman a deadpan stare, but he only looks back with genuine confusion. To ensure Armani doesn't flee, Turan ties him to a tree, much to the prince's loud protests, and wails that if Turan dies on the dive, he'll be left to starve to death. Turan coolly replies that for both their sakes, he had better hope that doesn't happen. Without another word, he prepares to enter the deep, dark water. He plunges into the lake, beginning his long descent. Focusing his senses, he begins to scan the lake bed for the treasure. He continues to descend, his body adapting to the immense pressure. As he nears the bottom, the underwater landscape comes into view. He then cautiously explores the bottom of the lake, searching for what Armani promised. His search comes to an abrupt halt as he's confronted by a truly shocking sight. The merman's treasure is revealed to be the colossal, petrified remains of an ancient sea serpent. When he looks toward the head of the serpent, he declares, "I found it." However, having held his breath for an incredible length of time, he finally lets out a stream of bubbles and quickly clamps his hands over his mouth, realizing he is critically low on air. Just then, he takes air from an air sac. After that, he approaches the mysterious armored corpse. His eyes narrow, focusing on the details of the ancient remains. He discovers the corpse of a warrior, perfectly preserved by the deep water, and wonders if this was a Fran. His observation is confirmed. The body remains completely intact, a rarity for such powerful beings. His eyes are then drawn to a golden object clutched within the corpse's armor. The object is a strange, ornate compass, which he takes as his prize. Back on the surface, a worried Armani waits, still tied to the tree. Turan bursts from the water, gasping for air after his perilous dive. An excited Armani immediately asks if he managed to find the treasure. Catching his breath at the lake's edge, Turan calmly confirms that he did. Now on the shore, he examines his new prize, the golden compass, and quickly deduces its function. The magical tool allows him to sense the presence and internal energy of living things. As a show of good faith, he then uses his magic to break the chains on Armani's wrists. Armani stares at his now free hands in disbelief, realizing Turan is a man of his word. As Turan gets dressed, he tells the surprised prince that since he was guided honestly, he is simply keeping his promise. The grateful prince thanks the kind demon and promises to spare him should his people ever wage war on humans. Turan, thoroughly unimpressed, tells him to stop talking nonsense. Just then, the merman prince leaps into the lake. Beneath the waves, Armani transforms, his powerful merman's tail propelling him swiftly away. Watching him leave, Turan muses that the merman's claims of being royalty might have been true after all. Having concluded his side quest, he returns to the bustling port city of Abacha. Back aboard Captain Boros's ship, the sounds of punishment echo across the deck. Crew members who had been out late carousing are being whipped as punishment, groaning as they tend to their wounds. The boatswain cracks his whip, forcing the sailors to chant that they will not be late again. He roars that insubordination means death on their vessel. Turan emerges on deck to find the sailors being flogged and asks what all the commotion is about. The boatswain explains that he is punishing the men who returned late and drunk the previous night. He adds that this is what they get for causing trouble in town and ignoring the captain's warnings. Turan silently observes the brutal display of shipboard discipline. Using his new compass, he can see the vibrant life force of the sailors being whipped. He notes with interest that as they are wounded, he can visually see their life force draining away. He then asks for the captain, and the boatswain informs him that Boros is ashore trying to sell the captured pirate ship. In a local tavern, Captain Boros is negotiating with another rough-looking sea captain. He looks up from his drink, surprised by a new arrival. Turan enters the tavern and immediately asks Boros about the status of their deal. At this, Boros introduces the potential buyer, Captain Samuel, joking that with their combined missing eye in hand, the math checks out. Captain Samuel agrees to the price for the ship, a lump sum payment of 1,000 Zahar gold coins. Turan agrees to the price but raises one problem with the deal. Stating that carrying so much gold is inconvenient, he requests payment in magic tools or holy relics of equivalent value instead. Captain Samuel informs him that such precious items are not found in a port like this, and that he will have to travel to the city of Komad. He then explains that Komad is ruled by House Durman, a family with a tamer bloodline, suggesting Turan could buy a powerful beast with his newfound wealth. Remembering Aziz and his intelligent horse Tilly, Turan considers the idea, thinking a beast that understands speech would be very useful for his journey. Meanwhile, on Boros's ship, the crew celebrates their good fortune, believing that serving a powerful wizard like Turan has brought them luck. However, their celebration is cut short when a lookout in the crow's nest spots dark clouds looming on the horizon. The sky darkens rapidly, as the lookout screams a warning, "It's a storm." The boatswain immediately orders his crew to prepare the ship for the incoming tempest. The storm hits the ship with torrential rain and massive, violent waves. The boatswain frantically screams orders for the crew to furl the sails and secure the cargo. If they don't want to become fish food, they need to give it their all. The ship is tossed about like a toy in the raging sea, its mast dipping dangerously close to the water. The crew desperately clings to the rigging as violent waves wash over the deck. One unlucky sailor loses his grip and is flung screaming into the churning ocean. Just as the man is about to be lost to the waves, a strange blue energy envelops him, halting his fall. Turan stands calmly amidst the chaos, using his magic to rescue the sailors who were washed overboard. He then gently lowers the crewmen back onto the deck, their bodies still glowing with his protective magic. After that, he sternly orders a nearby sailor to get down for his own safety. With the crew out of immediate danger, Turan turns his attention to securing the ship itself. Our guy furled the sails first. After that, he secures the cargo, preventing the ship from being torn apart by the storm. With the ship stabilized, he orders everyone to retreat below deck to ride out the worst of the storm. Below deck, the drenched and exhausted crew huddles together, shivering from the biting cold. After ensuring the ship is secure, Turan lets out a sigh of relief. He then enters the hold to find the crew, who immediately begin to thank him profusely for saving their lives. Turan simply asks if anyone is hurt, and upon hearing they are fine, he declares, "That is all that matters." Captain Boros gratefully tells Turan they would have sunk without his intervention and asks if the ship can withstand the storm. Boros says they must simply trust the ship, but points out they have a more immediate problem. He gestures to the crew, who are all shivering violently, at risk of succumbing to hypothermia. Turan assesses the grim situation, realizing the sailors are in danger of freezing to death. Taking command, he orders the entire crew to gather around him in a circle. A panicked Captain Boros questions the wisdom of starting a fire on a wooden boat, but Turan calmly assures him that he will keep it contained. With a simple snap of his fingers, he activates his magic and conjures a large, controlled sphere of fire, which hovers safely in the palm of his hand. He then releases the fire's energy, sending a wave of pure warmth radiating throughout the hold. Captain Boros stares in disbelief, having never witnessed such a sophisticated and controlled use of fire magic. The freezing sailors sigh in relief as the magical warmth washes over them, chasing away the deadly chill. Watching this incredible display of power and care, Captain Boros finally understands the meaning behind an old saying. He recalls the ancient principle, humans shall serve the wizard, and the wizard shall reign over humans, yet also care for them, he thinks, watching his crew gather around Turan, who has become their protector. After their perilous journey, the ship finally arrives at Komad, the largest city in the northern Enreal Desert. As the crew disembarks, Turan prepares to set foot in a new, unfamiliar land. Before he leaves, Captain Boros tries to give him a hefty hiring fee, which Turan politely recognizes as far too much. But the captain explains that the money is a token of gratitude from the whole crew, who all chipped in after selling the pirate ship. Back on the docks, moved by the crew's sincerity, he accepts their payment, promising to treat them all to a proper meal if they ever meet again. As he prepares to leave, a crewmate shouts out a final, heartfelt farewell to Sir Knight. Then, the entire crew gathers to wish him well, shouting that they will miss him. Clearly touched by their camaraderie, he waves back, promising he won't forget them. Captain Boros watches him go, placing a hand over his heart in a gesture of profound respect. With his bag of coin and supplies, Turan officially begins his solo adventure in the bustling desert city. The vibrant city of Komad thrives under the desert sun, its architecture a stark contrast to the lands he has seen before. He makes his way through the crowded streets, observing the locals and their unique customs. Suddenly, his keen senses are alerted to something unusual in the crowd. Using his mana sense, he spots several individuals glowing with power, standing out from the ordinary townsfolk. His focus lands on a stern-looking man dressed in armor, clearly a house knight on patrol. Deciding to gather information, he politely approaches the knight. As he does, he subtly unleashes a hint of his mana, and the knight is instantly terrified by the sheer pressure, and calmly asks the startled knight if he belongs to House Durman. Recognizing that he is in the presence of a superior wizard, the knight immediately bows, ready to do his bidding. While being escorted, he introduces himself simply as a traveler from the port city of Abacha and states his purpose clearly, telling the knight that he wishes to see the head of the house. Soon, he arrives at the grand and opulent estate belonging to House Durman. Inside, he changes into the outfit given to him by the royals. The house head, observing him, makes a cryptic comment, "It suits you well," and introduces himself as Cal Durman, the head of the house. Cal studies Turan's face intently, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Turan is left slightly confused by the man's intense scrutiny. When asked his identity, Turan gives his cover story, Turan Brahms, from a fallen guardian bloodline, and explains that he has come to buy a monster, and Cal agrees, appointing his daughter to be Turan's guide. Sensing something is amiss, Turan decides to ask if Cal has seen someone who looks like him before. Cal initially deflects, claiming it's nothing and that he was mistaken. But then he admits that Turan looks a bit like someone he knows, deeply piquing the young man's curiosity. As Cal's daughter Puma leads him away, she notes that he must have a fair bit of money to be seeking a monster from their esteemed house. She then correctly guesses that his claimed guardian bloodline would be perfect for the life of a mercenary. Turan's mind, however, is elsewhere, completely consumed by the question of who Cal saw in his face. He speculates whether the resemblance is to his mother or to the father he's never known. While he shares some features with his mother, he doubts it's enough to cause such a strong reaction. He reasons the resemblance must be to his father, a startling possibility. His deep thoughts are interrupted as Puma announces they've arrived. She formally welcomes him to the famous House Derman breeding grounds. He follows her down a long, impressive hall, amazed by the sheer scale of the facility. He takes in the sights of the legendary breeding facility and observes the various enclosures, each a unique and self-contained world. The first habitat contains a pair of large, powerful-looking wolves in a forest environment. Our guy is impressed that each room has its own unique habitat, even one for a creature as large as a mammoth. Puma points out a fine horse they raised with great care, but his financial reality is about to hit him. When she quotes the price of 4,000 gold coins, he is stunned to realize it's twice his entire fortune. Realizing he isn't as rich as he thought, he debates giving up, but knows he can't cross the desert alone while carrying a chest of money. His eyes then land on a different creature, a solitary eagle held in a large cage at the end of the hall. He asks about the eagle and is relieved when she quotes a much more manageable price of 1,500 coins. Our guy considers it a bargain for its mana capacity and immediately asks about its special abilities. Her bland answer, "It's smart and flies well," leaves him completely underwhelmed. She then explains the major catch: the eagle is so intelligent that it refuses to listen to anyone it deems dumber than itself. As if on cue, the eagle reacts, confirming it understands every word being said about it. After that, he approaches the cage and speaks directly to the bird, confirming its remarkable intelligence for himself. He then cheekily insults its appearance, earning a sharp, annoyed glare. Puma confirms that it understands everything and reveals they even tried to teach it to read, but it flatly refused. At this, she laments that its great strength is wasted, as its stubborn pride makes it worthless to most buyers. When he asks Eagle, "Is there anything you want?" but she dismisses him, stating that it's no use asking. However, to her surprise, the eagle suddenly stands at attention, focusing intently on Turan. Puma is completely shocked by the eagle's sudden and uncharacteristic change in demeanor. He points to himself, correctly guessing that the eagle has chosen him as its desired master. As the eagle stares back intently, he wonders why it would choose him, a seemingly ordinary person. Turan then devises a unique offer. If he buys the eagle, will it finally be willing to learn how to read? To Puma's astonishment, the proud eagle immediately nods in agreement, sealing the deal. Back in the main hall, Cal Derman begins a complex magical ritual to bond owner and monster. With a final flash of light, he declares that the two of them are now formally bonded. Finally freed from its cage, the eagle immediately soars to Turan and lands on his arm without hesitation. Cal is surprised at how readily the creature follows him and tells the young man to take good care of it. But just as he prepares to leave, he turns to Turan, and he states, "I could just let this pass," but, unable to let it go, Cal decides to ask his question directly. "Do you happen to have any connection to Talus?" The question hangs in the air, creating a moment of intense tension between them. Turan repeats the unfamiliar name, Talus, confirming he's never heard it before. Seeing his genuine confusion, Cal quickly retracts the question, asking him to forget he ever brought it up. But the seed of curiosity has been planted, and Turan now knows the name of the man he supposedly resembles, Talus. Seeing an opening, Turan decides to ask a question of his own and reaches into his robes. He asks Cal if he happens to know a woman named VJ. To aid his memory, he presents the hand-drawn sketch he carries of his mother. Cal examines it closely, searching his memory. After a moment, he firmly states that he doesn't know her, reasoning that he would never have forgotten such a beautiful woman. Disappointed but understanding, Turan accepts the answer and puts the sketch away. Changing the subject, he announces that he needs a moment to check his new purchase. He then lets the eagle fly free indoors, much to Cal's confusion. Turan calmly explains that since the price has been paid and the deal is done, it's only natural to check if everything is in order. Just then, our guy grabs the eagle's leg and both of them fly. Turan is pleased as the eagle now understands his commands. Having concluded their business, a servant announces that dinner has been prepared. However, Puma asks him how the flight was. At this, our guy replies that it was good, it felt like it cleared his head. After that, she formally introduces Turan to her other guests, stating that he came from the Carmine region. One of the guests, a muscular man named Dolph Marin, notes that Carmine is near Arabian. However, Cal's daughter Puma defensively tells him not to associate their guest with the sparrows of Arabian. Changing the subject, Dolph introduces himself as belonging to a history bloodline and offers a handshake. Turan accepts, not yet realizing it's a test of strength. As Dolph squeezes with immense force, Turan secretly activates a defensive magic tool to counter the pressure. Impressed by his sturdiness, Dolph chalks it up to the natural resilience of a guardian bloodline. But uninterested in a show of strength, a woman changes the subject, asking about his newly acquired eagle. At this, our guy explains that he sent it out to fly after its morning riding practice and offers to call it over. With a simple mental command, he summons his new intelligent companion. Moments later, the massive eagle gracefully swoops in through an open window. The female guest, Yuma, is impressed by its obedience and tries to call it to her. But the prideful eagle immediately snaps at her outstretched hand, rejecting her completely. Furious at the rejection, Yuma shouts at the bird brain, wondering what she could possibly be lacking. She boasts that she could raise it better than some fallen noble, but the eagle remains loyally perched on its master's arm. Later, the dinner conversation turns to the recent trouble with the Dark Elf tribes to the west. The group begins gossiping about the Arabian subjugation force and its commander, the skinny Mesas. Yuma cruelly wishes for Mesa to be assassinated, calling her a wench who is nothing but skin and bones. Dolph joins in, laughing that she is a hideous sight and that he feels sorry for her future husband. Turan remains perfectly still, silently listening as they viciously mock his friend. The conversation then shifts to other houses that have clear successors for leadership. Dolph wishes that Talus of House Sahar would make a clear decision already, and hearing the name Talus's immediately recaptures Turan's attention. Feigning ignorance, he casually asks Puma what kind of person this Talus is. She reveals that Talus is the younger brother of Zahar's househead and the current second-in-command, effectively leading the entire house. Turan flashes back to Cal's earlier question about the man, and a horrifying truth begins to dawn on him. He realizes with a shock that his father is a far bigger and more dangerous figure than he ever could have imagined.